After the release of Mega Man 8 and Rockman and Forte, the classic Mega Man franchise would go dark for a decade. That was until the release of Mega Man 9. In the late 2000s, a retro revival was forming thanks, in part, to services like Xbox Live Arcade and the Wii Virtual Console. As a result, Keiji Inafune wanted to revive the long-dormant classic Mega Man series. But with a catch, it would be a full-blown retro revival in the style of the NES games. So what design choices would go into it, and how would Mega Man 9 recreate that classic feel? For those of you just joining me, this is the 10th part of my Mega Man analysis series, so if there's a mechanic I already discussed, I don't intend to retread on old ground. So, let's dive into Mega Man 9. Before discussing mechanics, there was a lot that went into the actual creation of Mega Man 9. As far as game releases are concerned, the last classic game was Rockman and Forte, released to Japan in 1998. Mega Man X saw continued near-annual releases, but its final release was X8, released late 2004 to North America and 2005 elsewhere. Various handheld spin-offs were still chugging along, at the time with Mega Man Star Force, but notably, they weren't main series console games. There was another phenomenon happening at the time, and that was several re-releases of the original games. 2004 saw the release of Mega Man Anniversary Collection, and 2006 saw the release of Mega Man X Collection, both releasing to consoles. 2005 and 2006 saw the re-releases of Mega Man 1 and Mega Man X through Mega Man Powered Up and Mega Man Maverick Hunter X, both on the PSP. In an interview with GameSpy, Keiji Inafune was fairly blunt about the reasoning for this. GameSpy asked if, between the re-releases of Mega Man X, Mega Man 1, and Mega Man Legends on the PSP, if Keiji Inafune was worried that, quote, people would think the PSP was becoming merely a place for ports or rehashes of Mega Man games. He responds, "These remakes are supposed to symbolize me trying to get the consumer, as well as the designers in Capcom's research and development, to understand what Mega Man is. So by going back to this series' roots, people will play and think, wait, this was a lot more fun than I thought. Then maybe we'll prove that making Mega Man X9 or Mega Man 9 would make sense. If these new games are not supported, as much as I dislike the idea, then it wouldn't make sense to make those sequels. The game industry, of course, is run on money. It's not like I'm making these games just for my own benefit. We have to make a profit. If we do make a profit, and it proves that Mega Man is still popular, then I would love nothing more than to continue the series to X9 and 9. Maybe if it sells a lot in America." I could be mistaken here, but it seems neither Mega Man Powered Up nor Maverick Hunter X were commercially successful, so plans for Mega Man 9 were postponed. That was, until the rise of virtual consoles. In an interview with Nintendo Power, they asked Keiji Inafune why it took so long for Mega Man 9, and he states, "Unfortunately, the simple fun of a classic Mega Man game doesn't fit into the grandiose and expansive world the consumer gaming industry has become. And so you have to make games that match the current expectations. If you did push to have a game like the classic Mega Man games made, it would be criticized for things like being simplistic, outdated, or too expensive. I thought it would be too difficult to bring out another classic Mega Man in the current gaming climate. And then, when Nintendo came out with WiiWare for distributing downloadable content, and I felt I had an opportunity to finally realize the dreams I'd been keeping on the back burner for so long. I think WiiWare offers a great combination of simple games at a low price, and as fate would have it, the Virtual Console is causing people to reevaluate the classic games for the NES and such, and to see what made them good. Our intent was to make a simple and enjoyable Mega Man sequel, so we said, let's make a new NES game, and from there, the ball got rolling. So it was thanks to the WiiWare in particular that classic Mega Man would see a revival. Capcom gave the go-ahead, and for the development of Mega Man 9, both Capcom and Inti Creates, who had worked on Mega Man 0, would work together. The staff size was around 20 people, which would have been large for an NES game. And on that end, it was decided that Mega Man 9 would more closely follow Mega Man 2 than Mega Man 8. It sounds like this was, in part, due to Mega Man fans regularly praising Mega Man 2 as the best game in the series, and in part thanks to the nostalgic retro revival happening, with people fondly remembering the NES games of their youth. In an interview translated by Shmuplations, producer Hironobu Takeshita states, "Our goal was to stay faithful to the Famicom, to return to those roots, and so our model was the original Mega Man and Mega Man 2. To that end, the team went the extra mile trying to replicate an NES game, oftentimes simplifying their art to match the aesthetic of the era, replicating things like screen flicker and trying to limit how many colors a sprite could utilize, or even use specific tricks similar to what the NES developers had to do. From Gen Kamada, a programmer on the game, the Famicom had palettes, which allowed you to set colors for sprites. Using palettes to change colors was a common trick of Famicom games, so we had to have it here. But to simulate that, I had to directly program color changes for each object 1 pixel at a time. I'd manually check my work as I programmed, going one by one. It was a real act of labor." Keiji Inafune even specifically created the art for Plugman to serve as an inspiration for how the rest of the bosses should be created. For Plugman, if I had to say, I aimed to make a Robot Master who was standard in all regards, something that would be a good basic model for younger staff. The previous Robot Masters would be good models too, but I think if I let them just design whatever they wanted as normal, there'd be a tendency to create designs that are too elaborate and overdone. Naturally, this would lead to Robot Masters that don't have that Mega Man feel. To avoid that outcome, I made Plugman very simple. It was like I was saying, "Please study this," to the staff. He's got a really obvious plug, a small color palette, and a simple, uncomplicated head. It's worth noting that I'm seeing conflicting info on who created Splash Woman. Keiji Inafune states that the design team came up with the idea for female Robot Master, and he ended up designing her. He then gives personal anecdotes to how he did this. However, in the Mega Man and Mega Man X official complete works book, Ryuji Higurashi also has personal anecdotes, stating, "She has no legs and thin wrists, a physical format I was not used to drawing. It took a lot of struggling, but in the end, I managed to make her look like a Mega Man boss. Or at least I think I did." So that's a little confusing to me, but maybe the initial design was by Keiji Inafune, and Ryuji Higurashi specifically recreated the design for other illustrations. If I'm not mistaken, in the credits of Mega Man 9, he's accredited as RH and as a publicity illustrator for Capcom, so I think that would make sense. And speaking of Inti Creates' role on Mega Man 9 versus Capcom's role, it seems the majority of the development staff on the game was Inti Creates staff, with all 3 planners on the game a part of Inti Creates: Satoru Nishizawa, Ryota Ito, and Satoshi Yazima. Capcom staff was then credited as game tuners and debuggers, as well as various marketing roles. While I've stated that the team wanted Mega Man 9 to have a Famicom feel to it, and feel like a direct sequel to Mega Man 2, they didn't fully restrict themselves to the Famicom, and did give themselves some allowances, especially for visual clarity. So all of these decisions would result in a Mega Man game that truly felt like it belonged on the NES, and, for better or worse depending on your tastes, ignored many of the innovations that would come about from later games, looking to create a game that was focused on the simple gameplay that made the series such a smash hit in the first place. Boot up Mega Man 9, and the first thing players will be greeted with is a brand new cutscene intro in the classic style of the NES games. Here, we discover various robots have gone rogue and are causing mayhem across the world. But, in a twist, these aren't Wily's robots, but rather Dr. Light's robots. And, as Dr. Wily reveals, he has a recorded conversation with Dr. Light, where Dr. Light point-blank says he wants to take over the world to a Dr. Wily who claims he's changed his evil ways. And then asks for financial donations. How in the world anyone trusts Dr. Wily after attempting to take over the world 9 times now, because as Mega Man 9 establishes, Mega Man in base was canon, is beyond me. But I'm sure the point is that it's supposed to be goofy and fun. Mega Man has his typical epic, "I'm going to help" type of pose before dashing off to defeat the out-of-control robots. In a fun Easter egg, Chun-Li from Street Fighter appears to be the news anchor, so just a nice touch from Capcom and Inti Creates. Honestly, I know this is just supposed to be a little fun way to launch us into the game, and it's supposed to be childish, but I kinda wish the plot were at least a little more believable within the world, but that's just me nitpicking here. Coming to the title screen, it's about what you'd expect for an NES game, with a cutout image of Mega Man, the logo, and press start button. Really, this is specifically the formatting of Mega Man 4 through 6, so even though the game mostly emulates Mega Man 1 and 2, there is inspiration here and there from the other games. That includes the intro cutscene itself, as Mega Man's 1 and 3 had no cutscenes, and Mega Man 2's was scaling the top of a large building. The goal was to replicate the feel of playing a sequel on the NES, and to that end, I think the team nailed it. Press start, and players will move onto the main menu. The options list for the original game is pretty different than if you'd purchased Mega Man Legacy Collection, which is what all of my footage is from. So for this, I'm using footage from the YouTube channel Nintendo Complete, as it's been quite some time since I played the game on its original hardware, or busted out my Nintendo Wii for that matter. The game menu actually has some interesting new things listed. We have Game Start, a challenge list, rankings, options, and downloadable content. Even pressing into New Game will give players the new option of Time Attack, as well as unlockable versions of the game, which sadly were DLC when they first came out. The DLC for the game includes Hero Mode and Superhero Mode, which are far more challenging versions of the game, Endless Attack, which, as the name implies, is a non-stop Mega Man game to see how far you can get without dying. It includes Proto Man mode, which lets players play as Proto Man, who functions more akin to Mega Man from Mega Man 4, with a slide and a charge shot, but takes double damage and double knockback, making him a bit of a glass cannon. All of the DLC is interesting, but I'll touch on those at the end of the video. Fortunately, it is included as part of Legacy Collection 2. One more thing to quickly touch on is that while most of the music for Mega Man 9 is original, the menu theme is the same menu theme from Mega Man 2. I'd wager this was to evoke even more nostalgia for Mega Man 2 players, but it's a bit of a shame there wasn't something original here, although it does fit in with the sound font of the rest of the game. I'm going to get into these various additions at the end of the video, so for now, let's click into the game and get started. And like that, we are brought back to Deja Vu from Mega Man 2. The stage select is clean and simple, with basic horizontal lines a la Mega Man 2. As I continually stated throughout my Mega Man NES videos, that was the stage select I felt was the cleanest, so if there's a stage select screen to emulate, I think that was the one. There is a new feature compared to the NES games though, this time being a shop. While I'll touch on the shop later, I do want to note how clean the UI is for entering the shop. It's cleverly put at the bottom of the screen, centering within the stage select text, and really goes to show just how poor of a job Mega Man 7 did at not conveying there was a way to enter the shop within its menu system. Because here you have a game stylized to the NES that makes it perfectly clear in a clean manner that there is this option. The other thing worth noting is that Mega Man is at the center of the screen, and like Mega Man 3, his eyes now track the cursor. Of the former games, only Mega Man 5 and Mega Man 6 also included Mega Man at the center of the screen, but for some reason removed his eyes from tracking the cursor. It was a really nice touch in Mega Man 3, so I appreciate the return here in Mega Man 9. So let's select our first boss, and for this playthrough, we're going to start with Galaxy Man, purely due to weakness chains. The boss intro will begin playing, and once again, another return of homages to Mega Man 2. Not only is the boss select music the same theme as Mega Man 2's, but we also get a clean bar with the boss inside, and outer space, or speed lines, flying past in the background. The bar itself is a little different from Mega Man 2 in both its color and how the boss's title comes across the screen, with this probably being a little cleaner in Mega Man 9, as the boss text is outside of the boss's bar line and is white text on black, which pops a little more than Mega Man 2's white text on teal. In Mega Man 2's intro, the bar is already across the screen, and the boss jumps down into it before doing a cool pose. With Mega Man 9, the bar expands from the center before the boss phases into existence and then does their pose. This is more reminiscent of Mega Man 5, where the bar contracted into the screen, and then the boss would phase into existence before doing a pose. Of these intros, Mega Man 2 is still my personal favorite, because I like the actiony feel of the boss jumping down into place before doing their pose. But this still has a nice and clean look, and is a nice homage with enough changes to not be a 100% ripoff of the game that clearly inspired it. So we are now in Galaxy Man stage, but before moving forwards, let's go over Mega Man's mechanics. Because, for the most part, you can wipe clean any mechanic that came after Mega Man 3. From an ability standpoint, Mega Man functions exactly as he does in Mega Man's 1 and 2, only being able to jump and shoot. But from a mechanics standpoint, Mega Man functions exactly how he does in Mega Man's 3 through 6. This also affects bosses and iframes, which I'll touch on as well. So, in terms of running, Mega Man starts and stops on a dime when players put an input in. Mega Man 1 had a decent amount of deceleration after letting go of the movement button, and while Mega Man 2 drastically toned down this deceleration, it was still there to an extent. So, in this regard, Mega Man 9 emulates Mega Man 3, where there was no deceleration factor whatsoever, giving players the precise feel of Mega Man the games have become known for. In terms of jumping, the game also emulates Mega Man 3 and beyond. In Mega Man 1, the jump had a little bit of leeway to it in that after holding jump for a certain period of time, the game would say, "I got you," and have players complete a full jump, even if players let go of the jump button before the jump had completed. Mega Man 2 tones this down a little bit, giving players more direct control through holding the jump button, but still retains a slight element of helping players complete the jump when they're near the top. Mega Man 3 made this completely under the player's control, with Mega Man immediately falling when players let go of the jump button. While there are reasons to let players complete a full jump even when they've let go of the jump button, as I've outlined in my previous videos, this level of full control feels the best for Mega Man, as players will be consistently jumping and dodging out of the way of projectiles, and likely want this full range of control. So these are the elements I'm talking about when I say Mega Man mechanically functions the same as Mega Man 3. From a moveset standpoint, Mega Man can no longer charge his Mega Buster, which Mega Man 4 and beyond introduced. He can also no longer slide, which Mega Man 3 and beyond introduced. All of this leaving him with only being able to jump and shoot, therefore having the same moveset as Mega Man 1 or Mega Man 2. So I suppose in that way, Mega Man 9 really is an alternate timeline sequel to Mega Man 2, as it would further hone in on the basic mechanics of Mega Man 2. Mega Man losing his moveset will affect how different players view Mega Man 9 from the onset. The first of these abilities is sliding. Sliding was first introduced in Mega Man 3, and it's an ability that I happen to love, and probably part of the reason Mega Man 3 edges out Mega Man 2 in terms of my personal favorite Mega Man game. So it's an ability that I was pretty disappointed was dropped from Mega Man 9. But none of the challenges in the game are designed around having a slide, so it shouldn't be something players ever think they actually need to complete the game. I don't think the slide ability would really add too much to your chances at beating most of the stages or bosses here, which is something that you can test for yourself to see how you feel by playing as Proto Man, as he retains Mega Man's moveset from Mega Man 4. This primarily changes how boss and enemy attack patterns will be, as the team had to ensure that players could run under or jump over an obstacle without needing to rely on the speed and height change of a slide. There were some stage challenges in the prior games that used the slide, but they were minimal and I don't think added too much to the stages, so really, this is something that's going to mostly affect combat. Probably the most notable change is in Mega Man 9 removing the chargeable Mega Buster. This is an element I've always felt I could take or leave, so it's not one I personally mind, as I like the simplicity that not needing to charge brings, but I'd guess this is probably the larger choice for most players. By removing the ability to charge, it also means that bosses are weighted completely different from Mega Man 4 and beyond, and return to the earlier games. A major way that bosses were weighted differently to emphasize the charge shot was to increase their iframes and alter how much damage the Mega Buster dealt to bosses. For the most part, in games with a charge shot, Mega Man's Mega Buster only deals 1 damage, while the charge shot deals 3 damage. For enemies who don't have iframes, rapidly firing could be the better option, but that's enemy dependent. For bosses, the charge shot was always the better choice, in part due to this damage increase, but also in large part due to an increase in boss iframes. To better emphasize the importance of the charge shot and make it the better choice for fighting bosses had a much larger length of invincibility frames after being hit. This made it so players who rapidly fire their Mega Buster wouldn't deal extra damage, making charging the Mega Buster feel all the more worthwhile. It's also why in a game like Mega Man and Bass, where Bass can rapid fire his blaster like a machine gun, Mega Man still has better offensive capabilities against bosses. Mega Man 9's bosses do have iframes, but they're once again very short. They're there to limit players from rapid fire destroying bosses, but in a game with the charge shot, they're so short, the normal pea shooter would still be the better method to destroy a boss. Most of the bosses only take 1 damage from the pea shooter, but even still, this lack of iframes would break the power of the charged Mega Buster. While I happen to enjoy the slide mechanic, there are positives to this incredibly basic moveset, and really, I think it's part of what made Mega Man such a smash hit in the first place. There's nothing wrong with adding complexity to a game, but it does create a different feel. By having such a basic moveset, it allows for all of the challenges to really sing, as all of them are designed around amplifying and showcasing this simple playstyle. It becomes a test of how well you can master something basic, and that in and of itself can be incredibly rewarding. It also means that everything around the moveset can become complex, because players will always have an understanding of the tools at their disposal to deal with the complex situations around them. Enemies and challenges don't have to be basic, as long as they're fair in the way they're set up for players to deal with the situations. And I think this is part of the magic of Mega Man. For many, including myself, the games and the designers who work on them feel like they've mastered how to create interesting and unique challenges around this simple gameplay, and it's that merger that makes the games so fantastic. So, with the mechanics discussed, we find ourselves in Galaxy Man's stage. Our first few screens introduce us to most of the main concepts of the stage. These UFOs with sine wave arcs, launcher transporter obstacles, where touching one will transport Mega Man to a different one, then launch him into the air, and finally, the most dangerous obstacle, which is these claw machine grabbers that will quickly fly down, latch onto Mega Man, and then rapidly move him either to the left or right. This stage is very much structured to teach players the basics of the mechanics during these first screens before quickly ramping up the challenge for all of them, which is a nice way to do things, as it keeps the obstacles fresh as they're revisited. The UFOs are a very basic enemy challenge, so this is the only one that's really shown with some danger, as the first horizontal sequence has some spike trap challenges. But the transporter launchers are introduced in their own separate screen, with no danger whatsoever, really ensuring players can learn this mechanic safely. The claw machine Boom Bee catchers are introduced in this really clever section, where a gap in the ceiling allows the catcher to quickly fly down and grab unsuspecting players, but a wall immediately to the right blocks players from truly being in any danger. It safely introduces the claw grip, but also has a unique layout with a hole in the ceiling, making it a little more interesting than a basic open room. At the top left is a tempting large energy health refill, and if players go for this, they'll also learn that the Boom Bee catchers don't seem to respawn if they've left within the same screen. Quickly afterwards is the true Boom Bee catcher challenge, where players who are caught will be dragged along the screen and over spike pits. It's a great way to make players instantly react to what's coming ahead of them, and when I think about it, it's like a shortened version of the snowboard sequence from Mega Man 8, but more fun as it feels more within the normal mechanics of Mega Man and short-lived. There's also tension, as you won't know exactly when they'll let go, and while players will jump over the first pit of spikes, the catcher will let go either just before or immediately over the second pit of spikes, meaning players will have to react instantly to which direction they need to fall. I like the idea here, but I'm not sure how I feel about the nature of the catcher not necessarily letting go of you in the same place. The Boom Bee catcher travels at a faster speed than Mega Man's normal run speed, so it makes this a case of needing to instantly react properly to a sudden speed shift you won't be expecting, and one that you won't necessarily be able to predict as he's let go of me at different times. That does make me feel like there probably should have been a super quick tell before he'd let go, to give players at least a slight moment longer to react to this. Outside of that one gripe though, this is a cool obstacle idea, and I especially like that the second one leads you over a pit, and you'll probably instinctually think this is trouble. When you drop down to the next screen, if you don't move, it's a pit of spikes, but I think there's an instinct at play that these guys are bad news and dragging you somewhere bad, so I like that dichotomy in this screen transition. There's another fantastic screen with these catchers later in the stage, where players will be traveling back and forth along the room and have an opportunity to witness where one of the catchers will drop in a safe lower platform, before realizing there's danger on the second middle platform and that catcher will likely drag them right into it. So it perfectly gives players the opportunity to read this danger and then eventually react to it. Another great idea comes immediately afterwards, with a number of tempting items next to spiked walls. At this point, players should definitely be wary of the catchers, making this a fair trap. One more element to the stage is introduced a little later, at least when you're playing in normal mode, which are these eyeball aliens who, upon destroying one, will burst into a cluster of smaller ones. This is a great concept where the enemy's attack, which is bursting into smaller eyeballs that shoot out, only comes into play if players actually attack the enemy. It makes them a sort of trap enemy, who are obstacles that are in the way players will want to destroy, but incredibly unique in that their main offense is from getting injured. The teleport launchers are used a couple more times in the stage. The most interesting usage is in the middle, where players will both need to make it to a launcher above a platform, but then avoid it in order to progress. There's no true danger in touching the teleport launcher outside of time loss, making this a fun and fair falling challenge. So overall, the stage is filled with some great concepts, mostly used in interesting and fun challenges. Another note to this stage is that if players have the Jewel satellite ability from Jewel Man, it completely trivializes just about every single challenge in this stage, as players can use the weapon to prevent the catchers, UFOs, and aliens from touching them. So this works as a nice intentional easy mode for the stage, both giving a great purpose to the weapon you'd unlocked, while also giving struggling players an opportunity to complete the stage if they're clever with their weapon usage. Galaxy Man's ability is what Jewel Man is weak to, so that also means you're only getting this easier means of traversing the stage if you beat Jewel Man without his weakness, meaning you still do need to complete some level of challenge to be able to make this stage so easy. Teleport and launch your way through aliens and asteroids, and players will reach Galaxy Man. Galaxy Man is a pattern boss where he'll do the same 3-step pattern consistently. 1. Fly up to the sky and turn into a UFO, then drop his black hole bomb, which will fly back and forth, attempting to end up over Mega Man. The black hole bomb has more acceleration and deceleration than Mega Man, meaning players can use this to their advantage to try and make the black hole bomb end up far away from them. 2. He'll appear directly underneath the black hole bomb as the black hole attempts to drag Mega Man into both of them. Players will need to consistently run away from the black hole bomb and Galaxy Man to avoid touching them and taking contact damage. But while you can play it safe, you can also get attacks in by quickly spinning, shooting him, then turning back around to run during his iframes. So it gives players a nice opportunity to shorten the fight if they want to take the risk, with the danger relative to how far they were able to get the black hole bomb away from them when it goes off, and how dexterous they are with their fingers, making for a nice skill challenge. 3. He'll fly across the screen as a UFO again, then drop down for his second attack. This involves him either doing a tell to show he's going to attack, then swoop upwards towards the player, which players will need to read and quickly jump over, or he'll fly straight up, which will then lead back to his UFO black hole bomb attack. Reacting properly to this tell can require a quick read from players, but I found that once I knew what to look for in his tell, I was able to pretty regularly avoid this attack without any trouble, and really lay damage into Galaxy Man when I got a good pattern. Rinse and repeat. While Galaxy Man performs what's essentially the same pattern constantly, it's a fun fight that's not too complex for players to learn, and is fun to master. Some of the bosses in Mega Man 9 have patterns like this, and some don't, and I think because there's variation, it makes a pattern boss fight like this a nice additional touch, because it therefore adds variety. Galaxy Man is weak to Concrete Man's Concrete Shot. While he has no special reaction to it, the Concrete Shot will deal a whopping 4 damage per attack. On top of that, the Concrete Shot can be used to cancel out Galaxy Man's Black Hole Bomb, making him completely defenseless when he warps to be underneath the bomb, as he'll just stand still for a moment, with gravity no longer pulling players towards him. This quirk to the boss fight is especially fun, and I like how the concrete shot ability slightly alters the challenge of the fight on top of the normal additional damage it deals. So I think this is a great start to Mega Man 9, with both a well-designed stage and well-designed boss. After defeating a boss, you'll have the option to save your game. Saving in Mega Man was only available in Mega Man 8 and Mega Man in Base, meaning this is a bit of a compromise from the NES games which used a password system. Apparently, the team actually thought about using a password system instead of a save system, just like in the original NES games, but I'm pretty thankful they updated this bit of Mega Man. Another update comes in the sheer number of save slots, with players now having 8 total slots instead of the prior 3. On top of that, the UI is now set up for a full screen save file, showing far more data than ever before. I don't think you necessarily need to see this much for a save file, but since they have the full screen by using this UI system, might as well. While I like the clean look of seeing multiple save files at once, which also makes it quicker to assess which save file you want to enter into if you have multiple files, it's still a nice quality of life addition to give players so many more save slots. Defeat your first boss, and players will be treated to a mid-game cutscene. While the NES games briefly dabbled with these in Mega Man 3, I don't think we really started to see these happening more frequently until Mega Man 7. In this cutscene, players will discover the police have taken Dr. Light into custody over the out-of-control robots. It's a nice little touch to add some more urgency to what the player is doing, as now you get the additional motive of clearing Dr. Light's good name. I also like how most of this cutscene was handled with the various sprites interacting with each other. The team could have made this a cutscene more akin to the intro of the game, or like the image we see of Dr. Light locked up, but by using the game's sprites, it makes the cutscene feel much more in-world. This decision was probably made as a way to give the game more of an NES feel, but I think it also has the benefit of feeling more immersive than being pulled out into a cutscene filled with images. For defeating Galaxy Man, players will obtain the ability to use his black hole bomb. So it's off to the Robot Master weakest to that, Jewel Man. Jewel Man's stage sees players descending into a mine with a mix of falling challenges and horizontal platforming. I don't think there's anything here that stands out too much about the standard horizontal platforming in the stage. The most interesting challenges in the stage come from these swinging platforms that will rock based on Mega Man's momentum. As Mega Man runs from one side to another, it will increase how high the swing goes, making for a platform that's height is dependent on the player's ability to manage this. The first swing is introduced over a safe bit of ground, with the only danger being a Gagabiol below. Afterwards, players will quickly find themselves over an instant death pit, with a precision jump where players will need to swing high enough to reach a mid-boss gate without jumping into the death pit, but not so high that they end up accidentally jumping into a wall of spikes. This is the sort of challenge I really enjoyed, and it's one I would have liked to have seen more in this stage. There's one more spike wall jump challenge a little later on, before swing will block players' path to dropping down and progressing, meaning they'll have to use the swing's mechanics to get it out of the way and this time drop below. All of these are great little platform challenges, and I honestly found them more interesting than the large swath of more generic enemy challenges throughout the stage. One more thing I want to note is that Datarna Yappa are introduced in this stage, which are robots that will fly up from a pit, then slowly drop down, and maybe even shoot a projectile when it does so. This is basically a return of the up and downs we've seen in prior Mega Man games, and while there's still a pit trap, they actually feel a little more fair to me than the ones we see in Mega Man 4. And I was trying to figure out why, so I put these side by side to see if maybe the ones from Mega Man 4 travel faster or spawn at a different point. From what I can tell, it seems like they basically travel at the same speed. However, it looks to me like the up and down spawn when Mega Man is slightly closer to a pit than they do in Mega Man 9. It looks to me like when players are around a half tile away from a pit one of these guys are in, that will spawn the up and down of Mega Man 4. Meanwhile, if players are around one full tile away from a pit in Mega Man 9, this will spawn its Datarna Yappa, which means players are given slightly more time to react, making this trap feel that little bit more fair. If you notice, I'm using the first pit we find in Mega Man 9 to test this, but if I test this in the second pit, the Detarn Yappa spawns when the player is around halfway across the tile, like in Mega Man 4. But the Detarn Yappa is in the middle of a 3-tile long pit instead of a 2-tile long pit, which is what accounts for this difference in spacing, meaning, once again, you're still given more time to react than in Mega Man 4. What's so fun about this detail to me is that I noticed in playing, these felt more fair, but I wasn't sure exactly why, and looking at it in detail, it's a difference in player detection range for when these spawn, and it goes to show how much subtle tweaks like this can really change the feel of an enemy. These little tweaks are things designers are constantly doing behind the scenes to try to make enemies and situations feel just right, but they're typically invisible for players to see in the final product because you only get the final version. You didn't get to see all of the versions that were totally unfair or super easy or just didn't feel right that the designers kept tweaking. So play these games again and see if you can feel the difference in the player detector range. About halfway through the stage, players will run into their first sub-boss of Mega Man 9, at least on this route, Stonehead. For this sub-boss, a number of rocks will drop down from the ceiling players need to read and avoid before the actual sub-boss of Stonehead, which will cause enough force when it hits the ground to stun the player. It will then roll along the ground and then up the wall back into the ceiling. It's a simple concept of reading and reacting to obstacles from the ceiling, and then properly timing out a couple jumps. The sub-boss doesn't have too much health to overstay its welcome, to my preferences, as I don't like when these sub-bosses are bullet sponges, and it's a nice quick challenge breaking up the stage. Overall, this feels like a more enemy-centric stage, and I think Stonehead is a fine sub-boss challenge, but the stage wasn't the most interesting to me, and I would have liked to have seen more swinging platform or falling challenges. Before moving on to Jewel Man, I want to touch on another quality of life change, or rather, removal of a quality of life change, and that's in Mega Man no longer being able to quick swap between weapons, with players once again required to go to the pause menu to do so, just like in the NES games. This was a great feature that was added in the Super Nintendo era to both Mega Man 7 and Mega Man X, but I don't know if dropping it from Mega Man 9 was in an attempt to be more accurate to the NES, or because the game was planned as a WiiWare game and that was the entire inception of it. Because I don't know how many of you remember this, or even know this if you're not as old as I am, but this is the Wii Remote. If you wanted to play more traditional games on it that didn't use motion controls, you either attached the nunchuck controller, or you held the controller sideways, like this. Or you bought an additional attachment with something like the classic controller. With the nunchuck or classic controller, players have easy access to shoulder buttons. But by holding the controller sideways, that's no longer the case. In other words, the controller Mega Man 9 was designed around was probably the sideways Wiimote. So this could be why the game doesn't include the ability to cycle through weapons, because the team was designing around the idea players would be using this far more limited controller. That said, I obviously don't know the decision making here, and it really could have come down to the team trying to replicate the NES games. It's unfortunate because I don't think you lose anything by including quick weapon swapping. It does make swapping between weapons a little more convenient, but I don't see a downside to that. Make it deep into the mine, and players will reach Jewel Man. Jewel Man is a reactionary boss fight, a la Crash Man or Gemini Man before. Jewel Man constantly runs back and forth across the screen, and he'll jump anytime players jump, hence his reactionary nature. Jewel Man also has a greater running speed than Mega Man, meaning no matter what, he'll be running into Mega Man and dealing damage unless Mega Man forces him to jump just before colliding and uses that opportunity to travel underneath. For his actual attack, he'll encircle himself with 4 diamonds utilizing his Jewel Satellite. This creates a protective barrier around him, while also making it more difficult for players to avoid him when they're trying to run underneath him after forcing a jump. While players can shoot in between the diamonds and hit him, if they hit a diamond, that diamond will launch out at the player, becoming a new obstacle. After a while, Jewel Man will shoot his remaining diamonds on his own, creating a projectile obstacle for players to avoid, and then he'll run back and forth for a bit without any defense, before once again utilizing his Jewel Satellite. Most reactionary bosses we've seen in the Mega Man games, if not all of them, seem specifically set to react to players shooting. So it's an interesting twist here to see a boss who instead reacts to jumping. because the jewels themselves all react to players hitting them, this all makes for a fight that is very much in the player's control, as the player's not only controlling themselves, but also the boss throughout the fight. It makes for another fun and unique fight in Mega Man 9 that stands out in a positive way thanks to how creative and different it is. The Black Hole Bomb is Jewel Man's weakness and serves as a creative way to alter the fight. Because the Black Hole Bomb sucks enemies and projectiles into it, it not only injures Jewel Man, but sucks his diamonds into the black hole, destroying them, making the fight far more simple, as players will no longer need to worry about this primary means of attacking. So in this way, the boss weakness feels like the perfect choice for Jewel Man, as it doesn't arbitrarily deal additional damage to him, but the tool itself makes sense for the way Jewel Man's attack functions. For shattering Jewel Man, players will obtain his Jewel Satellite ability, so it's off to use that ability on Plug Man. Plug Man's stage has 3 primary concepts throughout: a return of Mega Man's disappearing block challenges, these Smaplar electrical enemies who wrap around platforms, creating mostly get-hit challenges that could knock players back into spike traps or insta-death pits, and finally, Shadow Mega Man enemies who will chase players after they pass through one of these static bars. As far as the disappearing blocks go, this has been in so many Mega Man games by now, it's hard for Mega Man 9 to do something truly unique. But there are a few moments that I particularly liked, and it is worth noting that I don't think there was anything I'd call unfair or trial and error. For example, you could look at the disappearing block challenge from Mega Man 2 and say there's zero way to predict when one would appear over the player and block them from proceeding, therefore plummeting to their instant death. That makes it fully trial and error. One particular challenge that stood out to me is within the first room that contains disappearing blocks. The second sequence has an upper and bottom route. The bottom route is visually scarier, but probably the safer option. Meanwhile, the top route has a block that will appear right within Mega Man's path. Players can quickly leap through in time without this affecting them, but if they don't make it, the block will appear and the collision will automatically eject Mega Man out, likely resulting in a death. This is a fun way to utilize that mechanic of colliders suddenly appearing on top of Mega Man and ejecting him, and making an optional challenge where players have to race to make sure it doesn't happen. The second disappearing block sequence happens further along the stage, with a series of hidden blocks players will have to hop on, while also contending with the Smaplar enemies, and make sure they don't get knocked off of the safety area. This in and of itself creates a nice mini challenge, where it's typically safer to watch how the blocks will appear and plan your strategy before attempting them, but players won't be totally safe while doing so, and I like that variation in the gameplay. But in particular, there's one jump players will have to make, where they'll see what they need to do, as there's a disappearing block way below them, meaning they'll have to drop to it. But they'll also know this block will soon disappear, because that's the way these challenges work. So it requires a clever delay in jumping, where the correct safe block will appear from doing so. It's a nice anxiety-inducing challenge that asks players to understand the mechanics of these blocks. The other main conceit of this stage are in the Shadow Mega Mans, who will chase after the player once they cross through a static field. However, they don't particularly do much damage, they can't really jump, so they're not truly following Mega Man, and they can be easily destroyed. So it ends up being something that looks far more intimidating than it actually is. There's a section where players will need to jump and watch as the Shadow Mega Man clones will run below them into spikes, and I feel by ramping up the challenge a little bit in how these Shadow Mega Men either acted or hurt players, and then introducing more mini puzzles like this, it could have been a much more interesting sequence. So this stage is a bit of a mixed bag for me. The disappearing block sequence is nothing new by now, but it is well designed in how it's handled. The truly new idea and element of the Shadow Mega Mans ended up not being too interesting to me, and I think could have probably had more interesting ideas attached to it. Make it through those disappearing blocks, and players will reach Plug Man. Plug Man is a simple but clever robot concept that reminds me a bit of Spark Man from Mega Man 3 in that way. He'll jump around and only has one attack, but the attack itself is so interesting it makes the boss fight. And meanwhile, Plug Man himself acts as an obstacle as he jumps around, while players are also trying to manage dealing with his plug ball attack. The way his attack works is he'll drop a plug ball onto the ground, which will then track along the ground, up the wall, and then onto the ceiling. Once it's on the ceiling and detects it's over Mega Man, it will drop straight down. So players will need to first jump over the plug ball and then dodge and avoid it when it drops back down. It makes for a great fight, with players needing to consistently hop over ground plug balls, while also mentally managing where ones are on the ceiling, avoiding them as they drop, and staying safely away from Plug Man. I find this to be such a fun sequence of dodging that it's one of those fights that truly shows how much fun something simple can be, and how you don't necessarily need to overcomplicate a boss fight for it to be good. This also makes for a totally unique and different boss fight from the pattern-based Galaxy Man and reactionary Jewel Man, keeping the boss fights in Mega Man 9 so far fresh and interesting. Plug Man is weak to Jewel Man's Jewel Satellite, which is another clever boss weakness in the way this works. The Jewel Satellite deflects Spark Man's plug balls, making for a much more interesting boss weakness, as again, this works as not only something that damages him more, but more drastically affects the boss fight. So another fantastic boss battle from Mega Man 9. With Plug Man defeated, players should have accumulated a good number of bolts by now, which is Mega Man 9's currency, so I think it's time to take a quick break from stages and talk about the shop and currency system of Mega Man 9. By now, a shop and currency system is nothing new to the Mega Man series, with this originating in Mega Man 7, then evolving through Mega Man 8 and then Mega Man and Base. The currency system works in the same manner as Mega Man 7 or Mega Man and Base, so I don't have too much additional to add about it from when I first discussed currency systems. However, the shop system of Mega Man 9 is much more limited than that of the prior games. Those games let players purchase upgrades to Mega Man, especially once players got to Mega Man 8, which truly altered the overall gameplay. So, keeping with the simplicity of the NES Mega Man games, the shop system is really just filled with tools players can buy to temporarily help them make it through a stage. Every tool here that players can purchase is a one-time use tool, outside of the energy balancer. 1-ups, E-tanks, and the M-tank act as you would expect. Eddie is summoned, and like Eddie of Mega Man and Base, will toss some random potentially useful item drops out. Beat works exactly like he did in Mega Man 7, acting as a one-time save for players accidentally falling into a pit. Not only is there a one-time pit save tool through Beat, but also a one-time spike trap guard tool with the Shock Guard. There's an incredibly useful half damage tool, the Guard power-up, that's expensive, and again, one-time use, with players only allowed to carry one, but it can be critical in, say, one of the incredibly challenging Dr. Wily stages. Finally, spend 200 bolts and you can change Roll's outfit to her outfit from Mega Man 8. Or you can spend 20 bolts to remove Mega Man's helmet, which I love the look of, and in a fun little Easter egg, it also changes Mega Man's sprite in the stage select, but it makes Mega Man take double damage, meaning it's basically giving yourself a hard mode. Who knew that Mega Man's helmet was providing so much of his defense? Die once without the helmet, and players will automatically have their helmet back on afterwards, and need to repurchase this hard mode if they want it. Something I notice about Mega Man 9 is it's far more limited than the prior NES Mega Man games in how many E-tanks players can find throughout the stages, with the reward for mini challenge oftentimes being some bolts. That makes the currency more useful, and also helps make it so Mega Man 9 isn't so broken as some of the previous games, where players will be finding E-tanks everywhere. The removal of E-tanks in stages really feels like one of those choices that was done in order to make the currency system more viable. That said, in terms of E-tank balance, players can still stock up to 9 E-tanks and 1 M-tank, making it so they can trivialize most challenges for better or worse if they choose to grind for bolts. I mentioned in my Mega Man 3 video that I think 9 is a bit of overkill for this reason, and 4 E-tanks feels a little more balanced to me, but Mega Man 9 is pretty tough, and if the developers wanted struggling players to have these tools to help them through Dr. Wily's castle, then that's clearly the choice they thought was best, and what they thought was the best way to balance the difficulty of Mega Man 9. I will say that I really liked a lot of the upgrades Mega Man 8 and Mega Man Base would introduce to the Mega Man series, and it's something I'm a little sad to see nixed here, but if you're going for the classic feel and simple gameplay, those certainly don't make sense in Mega Man 9, and the shop system here really does represent items that are more in line with that Mega Man's 1 through 5 feel, with items that don't alter gameplay, but rather are meant solely for helping struggling players. For defeating Plug Man, players will obtain his Plug Ball ability, so it's onwards to the boss weakest to the Plug Ball, Tornado Man. In frequent series tradition by now, Tornado Man's stage brings us to the sky, and with that, the stage is filled with insta-death drops everywhere, as that makes sense for a stage where you're high up in the sky. To further complicate things, there are two primary obstacles introduced in this stage. The first are these platforms that look like pills to me, which will flip players around, meaning players have to time their jump when on these for if they're going to jump up or drop down. The second half of the stage sees the introduction of elements, with snow, ice, and eventually rain, that will either push players to the left, making it harder to jump to their required destination, or push players to the right, making jumps easier to make. It's basically the same challenge as Toad Man's stage, Tengu Man's stage, or the Robot Museum of Mega Man and Bass, but with some added complexity. The spinning pills are interesting timing challenges, as after players are safely introduced to this concept, it's quickly ramped up with a long challenge over an insta-death pit and spike traps all over, forcing players to play into the timing of how these pills spin them. The way it works is, if players are halfway down the backside or facing downwards at all, they'll fall if pressing the jump button. If players are halfway up the front side or facing up at all, they'll jump when pressing the jump button. There is a question of how readable this truly is in terms of when players will jump and when they'll fall, but I will say, I never struggled with this myself, although I do believe I've seen other people saying they had issues, so that's really the reason I'm calling this out. I think it's pretty clear that if you're up, you jump, if you're down, you fall, but let me know if this is something you struggled with. It was clever of the team to put the spike traps in the middle of the main challenges with this, because otherwise, players could constantly hop and pretty easily cheese out of the actual challenge. It's a unique idea, and everything here is well timed to ensure that if players are hopping and playing into the spinning without panicking, all of the platforms will time out properly for players to consistently progress through the challenge. This spinning platform challenge also makes a return in one of the rainy sections, where jumping will cause players to be pushed backwards. This is smartly limited to a far easier and shorter sequence than before, as the team is now combining two challenges into one, showing a nice level of restraint. These two challenges also work nicely together, so I'm glad the team did this. As I mentioned, the rain is nothing new, but there are a couple of nice touches here. The first are the main enemies who will be coming down, which are umbrellas that are also affected by the direction of the rain. It's a nice additional tell that will help visually indicate how the wind resistance affects Mega Man's horizontal jump speed. The second concept here are platforms hidden behind clouds. There's immediately a scary jump that looks like Mega Man won't make, and will likely cause players to tiptoe to the edge to try to make the most distance they can. However, players won't make the jump, and then be forced into learning about the hidden platform. This is only used one more time, which is a bit of a shame, because it is a fun visual, and really does throw you off a bit because it's so different from a standard platform. Most of this stage is really centered around these platform challenges, with enemy challenges limited here. And that's actually something I don't mind, as I enjoy platform challenges, so this was a stage I liked. I'm not the biggest fan of overusing the rain mechanic that originated from Toad Man's stage, so I'm glad that it was limited here, and the game had challenges related to being both pushed and pulled. Make it through the sky, and players will reach Tornado Man. Tornado Man only has one primary attack, his Tornado Blow. By using it, 4 tornadoes will ascend from the floor, and players will need to dodge out of the way. However, in a unique twist, while the attack is in use, gravity lowers for Mega Man, meaning he'll jump higher, more akin to his physics in water. In order to fully play up that element, and because this will help assist players in more easily dodging the tornadoes, there are portions of the ceiling with insta-kill spikes on the top, so players will still need to manage their jump height. To make things more interesting, Tornado Man can summon his tornadoes from the ground, or after jumping in the air, changing the target you'll be shooting at. Additionally, after he jumps in the air, if he doesn't use his tornado attack, or after using one, he'll then drop in a curve towards the player, providing an additional attack players will need to avoid. What this fight ultimately results in is a lot of jumping and dodging while falling, which presents its own unique gameplay variation, and something that makes Tornado Man stand out amongst not only the roster of Mega Man 9 bosses, but really bosses throughout all of the Mega Man franchise. It's a creative take on an attack that creates a temporary physics change, and as it's a simple fight with a simple pattern, nothing that ever feels unfair. Tornado Man is weak to Plug Man's Plug Ball attack. The Plug Ball drops instantly when players use it, then tracks along the wall and ceiling. While that can make it difficult to attack Tornado Man when he's in the air, as you'll need to be right next to him, similar to other boss weaknesses we've seen, the Plug Ball will destroy any tornado it touches, helping clear the way for players to not get hit. Unlike some of the other boss weaknesses we've seen, this isn't the most intuitive boss weakness in terms of how the attack functions. This would better work against a boss who clings to walls, like a Blade Man from Mega Man 10, but it's not like every single boss has to be designed around their weakness. It's a difficult balancing act because you want interesting and unique bosses, but you also want to have interesting and fun to use weapons. And additionally, I'm not of the mindset that a boss weakness has to be a perfect fit mechanically. It's okay for some bosses to be especially easy with their weakness, while others are a little tougher, because that helps to create variety. At least to my point of view, as someone who prefers fighting bosses Mega Buster only anyways. So all in all, I think this is another clever and creative boss within the Mega Man 9 roster. For defeating your 4th boss, players will receive a piece of scrap that looks like a gear. This will trigger a midway cutscene where Otto will explain that it turns out the robot's expiration date had come and passed, and they were supposed to be scrapped as decided by law. So another added mystery, but one that admittedly makes you feel a little bad. Many of the robots in Mega Man feel sentient, so it does bring out questions like, do Mega Man, Otto, and Roll have expiration dates? As Wily has thrown in Mega Man's face many times, such as during the end of Mega Man 7, does Mega Man only do good things because he was programmed that way? Although Dr. Light's goal has been to create robots with free will, and Proto Man was the prototype of this, but it's unclear just how much free will any of the robots from the classic games, including Mega Man, actually have. From Mega Man X, X is the first of a new generation of robots which contain an innovative new feature, the ability to think, feel, and make their own decisions, with that information coming from Dr. Light himself. So that would imply classic Mega Man doesn't have free will, or has limited free will. But it doesn't really explain, why does Base go against Dr. Wily? That seems like free will, unless he was just programmed to try to be as strong as possible and defeat Mega Man, in which case I guess there's some wiggle room. I don't know if there's ever been a full, clear distinction. It seems like robots have free will, to an extent, but are still bound by their programming in certain regards. Another thing I want to note about this, I talked about how I didn't like that Mega Man 7 has 4 bosses, then a midway portion of the game, and then another 4 bosses. I feel like this is exactly the solution I wanted, where you can still have a midway cutscene that plays out after defeating 4 bosses, but let players non-linearly choose which of those 4 bosses they defeat from the full roster. There are exceptions where defeating 4 bosses, then unlocking another 4 bosses makes sense, like in the case of Mega Man 8 where weapon abilities were required for the second set of bosses, or if it truly matters for the story. You could also argue with Mega Man 7 that the second half of the game has tougher bosses and stages, letting the first half be freely designed to be easier and second half be freely designed to be harder. But I'd argue that there's nothing wrong with balancing the difficulty of the stages so 4 are easier and 4 are harder, and let the player choose their own order, even within this. Yes, first-time players might go to a more difficult stage first and potentially be demotivated to continue playing, and that is something worth considering. But I do think in the case of Mega Man, the full non-linearity of the stage selection, with the freedom it provides and replayability, outweighs that negative. For defeating Tornado Man, players will obtain his Tornado Blow ability, so it's onwards to Magma Man. Magma Man's stage mostly consists of minor timing challenges, with the lava beams that shoot straight down from the ceiling, instantly killing players upon touching them. They're similar to the laser beams of Quick Man's stage or fire beams of Turbo Man's stage in that regard, except for that in this stage, they're firing off vertically. The pipe that shoots the beams has an arrow that will flash just before a beam comes out, making this a challenge that's easy to read. So what it makes is a challenge that really becomes wait for a moment, then jump or run, wait for a moment, then jump or run. This isn't really combined with much else in the normal version of the game, making for an incredibly simple challenge that honestly wasn't particularly memorable to me. Yes, you could argue something like the laser beams in Quickman stage are unfair and frustrating as it's pattern memorization, if you don't have Flashman's ability to freeze time and easily make it through, but that also made for something incredibly memorable. Here, it's a minigame of red light, green light, where it's time to go, time to stop, time to go, time to stop. And that's okay, but I think what would help elevate this is if there was something players were contending with to make it harder to stay within the safe zone. And because nothing like that is present here, it really is just starting and stopping. While I'm not the biggest fan of these portions of the stage does have some interesting and unique enemies. In particular, I like these Popo Helis, who fly up to the player with a small flamethrower. They're shielded from the front, making for an obstacle that's much more difficult to easily destroy and move on. But because they're only shielded from the front, it also makes these enemies weak to Splash Woman's laser trident ability, meaning these sections that use the Popo Helis are great little mini challenges where the correct boss ability can make a true, meaningful difference in helping with player progression. Along the same lines, there are also these jump roller enemies who spew out a flamethrower attack when away from players, then hop up when players get near. The way they're placed, these are rarely true obstacles, and when they are placed in a way that makes them one, they're incredibly simple to destroy with the Mega Buster. Still, the plug ball, which tracks along the ground, quickly and easily destroys them, clearing the way, and I once again like how useful the boss weaknesses are for specific challenges here. Magma Man stage is another one with a sub-boss, this time with the Changkey Dragon. The Changkey Dragon will fly back and forth across the screen in a sine wave pattern, with its head being its only weak point. Its body consists of giant Changkey fireballs, and will spew out Changkey fireballs. These fireballs are unique in that the spot that's first hit with the fireball will have fire that lingers, while the Changkey fireball will proceed to trail along the ground towards Mega Man. It creates a more specific dodge pattern, where players need to hop over an obstacle trailing along the ground, but also not jump into the initial fireball that was created. I like the idea a lot for a dodge pattern in sequence, and I actually wish it was used in a larger sense, because it seems like a fun obstacle pattern to master. Either way, that makes this a unique and fun sub-boss, and even though I don't think I quite mastered avoiding the attack, I did like the sequence it was creating. Another fun note about the dragon is that it's weak to the Black Hole Bomb ability, which will not only injure it, but suck up both the Chankeys it spews out and the Chankeys that make up its body, making for a really fun visual here. Speaking on the visuals, taking a quick break from game design, let's talk about the subjective topics of art and music. I talked a little bit about the art during the history portion for this video, but everything about Mega Man 9 is meant to replicate that classic NES feel, from the limited color palettes to the more simplistic designs of backgrounds and enemies. There are quotes from the team about how they had originally created art that was much more complex, but they had to redo it and tone it down in order to make it visually more simple and fit the aesthetic of the era they were trying to match. For example, background artist Hidetoshi Minamoto explains, "The backgrounds I made in the early stages of the development are very different from their final versions. The early versions were more elaborately detailed, but since our concept for MM9 was Famicom, I thought simpler backgrounds would be better." Producer Hironobu Takeshita further elaborates in a separate interview. "Actually, for the graphics, about halfway through, we scrapped everything and started over from scratch. Inafune was checking their work as they went, and he disapproved of the majority of what he saw. The problem was that, myself included, the whole staff didn't really fully grasp what that Famicom essence was. It required simpler graphics and backgrounds than we had first thought. We had a lot of meetings on this point. It was something we really focused in on." While there were minor exceptions in the team breaking NES rules for clarity, they really did do a fantastic job on the visual front of replicating the classic Mega Man NES style. So to that extent, the team nailed it. Now, if that's a good or bad thing, well, that's really going to be up for you to decide. I grew up with the classic Mega Man games, so I find the overall aesthetic to be charming. And while I might have certain preferences stage by stage when it comes to the backgrounds and tileset work, it's an aesthetic I happen to like. But my favorite visual aesthetic for classic Mega Man is Mega Man 7. I find the sprite work and background of that game absolutely fantastic, and this is the visual style I'd prefer. Granted, I do think the sprite is too big. And while I was beyond excited that Mega Man 9 was announced and it would return to that classic era of Mega Man, I also would have been excited about any new classic Mega Man announcement. So I'm not someone who needed this full retro style to appreciate Mega Man's comeback. So I think they nailed the aesthetic they were going for. Just on a personal level, I would have been happy to see excellent pixel art that wasn't necessarily NES retro. Just like the art, with the music for Mega Man 9, the team went all in with an NES retro musical style. And again, from a sound font perspective, I think they succeeded. The songs have this driving, raw energy to them that really matches the feel of a lot of those original songs. However, this is probably going to be one of the sections that I clash the most with Mega Man 9 lovers, so again, please acknowledge that this is all subjective at the end of the day. I think it's a shame that Mega Man 9 reuses some of the themes from Mega Man 2, in particular for its menu theme. Yes, it invokes nostalgia for those who played the original Mega Man games, and I like the song, but as it has been a decade since the classic Mega Man had released, and it's a franchise known for its strong music, I would have preferred something original over something nostalgic. Beyond that though, this is one of my least favorite Mega Man soundtracks of the classic series. And I hear the boos now. It's not that I dislike everything, by the way. I like Galaxy Man's theme, the shop theme, and Dr. Wily's Stage 1. I also really like Overdrive Scramble, which ironically is the theme to the DLC special stage that wasn't originally included with the game. There's nothing here that stands out to me as something I strongly dislike, but I've been a longtime Mega Man fan, and part of that was absolutely loving the music. So this was an element I was really looking forward to, and I suppose it was something that didn't live up to my expectations. For me, this music feels like the type of chiptune music I think of when people try to replicate the NES sound font, rather than the type of music I happen to truly enjoy. Because at the time, the developers weren't trying to make something sound like the NES, they were trying to make music as catchy and interesting as they could within the limitations of the NES. So what that led to were these fantastic scores with really catchy themes, because there were also songs on short loops that developers knew players were going to be listening to over and over again. Mega Man 9's music is credited to 4 different composers, including Ippo Yamada, who'd created music on prior Mega Man Zero games. So I'm sure they understood the assignment, and hey, I know Mega Man 9's OST has a ton of fans. So those are my thoughts. If you love this soundtrack or think it's one of the best in the series, I'm not going to take that away from you. This is one of those things that's truly subjective, and what connects with each person is going to be different. Make it through lava beams and a fire dragon, and players will reach Magma Man. Magma Man is simple. He'll leap towards Mega Man and fire a spread shot of 3 fireballs. What makes him a little more unique is that his boss chamber is set up as a 2-sided staircase, making it so part of this battle will be contending with positioning on said staircase. It seems that Magma Man will either do a short hop of 1 stair step or a larger hop of 2 stair steps. Because of his spread shot, that means that it's generally safer to stay next to him, as you won't need to worry about this firing and can just focus on avoiding him as he hops around. That makes this fight unique in that it's a fight that really becomes about hugging Magma Man as much as you can. I can see the argument that this nullifies his actual spread shot attack, but I see it more as creating a different strategy than other bosses. So that does make this another boss fight I enjoyed, as it was fun to quickly strategize how to best approach his attacks, and once again, how different and unique his attack pattern is compared to the other robot masters. In revisiting Mega Man 9, I initially thought Magma Man would be weak to Splash Woman, because, you know, water, but instead, he's weak to Tornado Man's Tornado Blow ability, which will blow out the flame on top of his head. While he'll still fire at players when his flame is snuffed out, it actually makes the attacks both visually change and slightly weaker, with his normal attack dealing 4 damage to Mega Man, and his weaker attack only dealing 2 damage to players. Tornado Blow is a full screen attack, so I think that makes it a little harder to make for an interesting way to destroy bosses when using it. So as that's the case, it seems like the team tried to find a middle ground by making it so the Tornado Blow doesn't have enough ammo to destroy Magma Man on its own, but will give players that added advantage of weakening Magma Man's attack. Granted, it's easy enough to just rapid fire him after quickly diminishing his health with the Tornado Blow. For defeating Magma Man, that marks our 5th boss defeated, And as such, after 5 completed stages, players will enter into a cute cutscene where Otto has upgraded Rush to have the Rush Jet ability. That does, once again, change the way players obtain the Rush Jet. In the initial NES games, Rush Jet was obtained for beating a certain stage, where that stage completion would just happen to result in obtaining the Rush Jet. So Airman in Mega Man 2, Needle Man in Mega Man 3, Drill Man in Mega Man 4, Gyro Man in Mega Man 5, or Plant Man in Mega Man 6 for the Rush Jet adapter. That was altered to a collectible in Mega Man 7 that could also be purchased if it was missed, and removed entirely from Mega Man 8 and Mega Man in Base. In the NES Mega Man games, obtaining Rush felt pretty random, as there was no true way to predict where he'd be found. If players wanted Rush Jet, that also created a very specific forced order for playing the game. So here, the team lets you get Rush Jet no matter what order you play the game, but it has to be obtained after completing 5 stages. So which system is better? To be honest, I don't think I have a strong preference, but I imagine the reasoning for this was to limit players from being able to break every single platforming challenge if they want, as they can no longer immediately obtain Rush Jet. Do you have a preference? And if so, what would it be? Speaking on Rush Jet, players also start with Rush Coil, similar to Mega Man 3 through 5. Rush Coil acts the same as in Mega Man's 3, 4, and 7, springing Mega Man into the air, while Rush Jet works the same as Rush Jet from Mega Man 4 and beyond, with it forcing players to move in one direction, while players only have control over its height. That means it's not as broken as the version from Mega Man 3, which lets players fly anywhere. These are tools I rarely use other than minor challenges when they're required, so it's hard for me to comment on their use as assistance tools, but I'm sure they do come in handy for struggling players. They function the same as in previous games, with the same pros and cons, so I don't think I have anything additional to add here. For defeating Magma Man, players will obtain his Magma Bazooka, so it's time to set things on fire and head to Hornet Man. Hornet Man stage will quickly reveal one of its primary challenges, with these roller platforms. The platform starts with a small ledge, and if players shoot at a rolled up portion, it will unravel to reveal the full platform. After a period of time, it will then roll back up, but roll far enough to remove the initial small platform, meaning if players miss their chance to jump off after unraveling it, they might be screwing themselves over. This is a major mechanic to the rolling platform, so I do think there's a missed opportunity in the screen that introduces them. This screen has one single rolling platform, and it's easy enough to shoot it, get the gist of how the platform works, and quickly move on before discovering that when it rolls back up, it will remove the initial step for a moment. This was something I missed, and only discovered once I was in a further section that had insta-death spikes below. So to that end, I think there probably should have been a couple of these to platform on, maybe even with a minor challenge where players might fall off, just to help properly teach the entire aspect of this platform before the stakes are quickly raised. And speaking on that section, later on in the stage, these rolling platforms are reintroduced over a bed of spikes, while players will also be dealing with scissor enemies called Scissors, which can actually be pretty challenging to fully avoid, really upping the challenge of this portion, as they can not only knock Mega Man back into a bed of spikes or hurt him through dealing enough damage, but the small moment of knockback can even cause players to miss progressing to the end of the platform before it re-ravels back up, forcing Mega Man to be pushed to his doom. It's a good challenge, and probably one of the harder ones in the base stages, at least I think so, but it's only this one sequence, with the rest of the stage set as simple combat challenges outside of its sub-boss, so I think it's a fitting challenge for this relatively short and sweet stage. The only other truly unique aspect here are these Bokazura robots, which will lob out explosive balls at Mega Man's position after being shot. Players will need to use these explosives to destroy the ground beneath, with some of the ground below eventually containing rewards or insta-death traps. It's a nice way to create a falling challenge, where players will need to avoid the very thing that creates the path forwards, and eventually safely navigate which ground to destroy, all while dealing with lobbing projectiles. Because players shoot the Bokazura to activate it, that also makes this not completely out of control, so there's no way they'll be in a panicky situation they didn't create on their own accord. What actually stands out the most to me about Hornet Man's stage is this stage's sub-boss, Hanabiran. This is a clock-like boss, with a row of flowers slowly ticking around a circular sequence of platforms, again reminding me of a clock. If players touch this flower bar, they'll get injured and knocked back, with the flooring of the room being a bed of insta-kill spikes. So players will need to continually hop around the platforms clockwise in order to avoid getting hit by this. To proceed, a flower will randomly appear on one of these steps and shoot out its 4 flower petals as a projectile at Mega Man, then disappear again. So while hopping around the platforms, players will need to quickly deal with the true enemy when they can, and then proceed to hop around the platforms and avoid that flower bar. It's such a unique way to fight an enemy, with pressing danger the entire time, that I think this is actually one of my favorite sub-bosses so far in the classic Mega Man franchise. It requires constant precision platforming and constant reactionary gameplay from the projectile flower petals, but never feels unfair thanks to the game's iframes and those lower platforms, meaning if players do get knocked back off of a platform, they can still save themselves from instant death. All of this makes for a stage that's pretty challenging in its totality, but one that I quite enjoyed. Make it through an entire flower bed and players will reach Hornet Man. Hornet Man is a boss fight that reminds me of Snake Man's fight from Mega Man 3. He'll run back and forth from one side of the screen to the other. Typically, once reaching a side, he'll leap into the air and use his Hornet Chaser attack, with 3 hornets flying out of their holes of his triple honeycomb body. These hornets will mark where the player is and then move a certain distance in that direction. Next, they'll stop for a beat and then repeat the pattern, marking Mega Man's new location. After doing this 3 times, the hornet will fly off screen after a beat. While these can be easily destroyed, they still do create more obstacles in the boss chamber players will need to avoid until being able to destroy all of them, or simply act as a sort of destructible shield for Hornet Man when they're in front of him. While this might seem challenging at first thanks to the number of obstacles appearing on screen, really, they're not too difficult to avoid and destroy, and Hornet Man's size and running pattern makes him incredibly simple to jump over and avoid. So long as players are rapid firing at all of the things, even if they take damage, they should still have the upper hand with a basic grasp of how this works. Still, with his pattern of firing homing projectiles from the sides of the screen, it creates another unique boss fight where players will want to stay on the center platform and consistently dance around obstacles as they rapid fire. One of my criticisms of Mega Man 6 was how all of the boss fights felt like slight variations of the exact same boss pattern. So I think that's part of why I'm so pleased to see this constant variation in how the battles work and play out, as it really does make each fight feel unique and require a different strategy. Hornet Man is weak to Magma Man's Magma Bazooka. Like when Magma Man used it, this is a spread shot, but what's extra interesting is that if multiple shots hit the target at once, in spite of iframes, this will deal damage per each shot, greatly multiplying how much damage players can dish out. From the standpoint of this being a spread shot, because Hornet Man sends out hornet projectiles that can be destroyed, it makes the spread shot a practical choice, simply because it's also easy to quickly destroy multiple hornets at once with a single shot and in multiple directions. From a boss weakness standpoint, I do think of people using fire to try and get rid of hornet nests, so this also practically works as the weakness, which is a nice added bonus. So all in all, another fun boss fight. Before moving on, I think it's worth talking a little more about some basic mechanics that were implemented to make Mega Man 9 have that retro feel. We talked about the visuals, music, and movement, but there's a little more to it. Part of the feel comes from the limitations of the NES, and in that regard, how scene transitions and camera tracking work. While diagonal camera tracking was technically possible to do by, at the very least, Mario 3 in terms of cartridge and chip upgrades that would happen throughout the NES lifecycle, the NES Mega Man games very specifically only had horizontal scrolling, with multi-directional scrolling only starting to become a factor by Mega Man 7. So in order to facilitate that classic feel, Mega Man 9 once again only uses horizontal scrolling, meaning vertical movement across stages requires scene transitions. Another mark of the classic Mega Man games was frequent use of scene transitions, with each scene typically serving as its own unique challenge. Really though, this is something that would separate the classic Mega Man games, in general, from the latter Mega Man X franchise, which has wide open stages and mostly does away with scene transitions. While slight changes were made to the pause menu over time, Mega Man 9 once again has a single, full-screen pause menu for selecting weapons and items, akin to Mega Man's 4 through 6. Finally, another part that really separates the NES games from some of the latter classic Mega Man games is the stage length itself. After Mega Man 2, where levels were short and sweet with frequent and condensed challenges, the game started to slowly balloon in stage size. By the time Mega Man 8 came around, stages were so large, they included 4 checkpoints, double the NES checkpoints of 2, and a halfway continue point. Instead of needing to fully restart the level once players ran out of lives, Mega Man 8 allowed players to restart at the halfway point if they'd made it there, likely to reduce frustration as the levels had grown so large in size. This isn't the most scientific way to look at this, but taking a look at Mega Man leaderboards, the top speedrunners in the world can complete Mega Man 9 within any percent run faster than any game after Mega Man 2, which would indicate the overall length of the game is likely slightly longer than Mega Man 2 and slightly shorter than Mega Man 3. Although, it is worth noting that Mega Man 3 has the Doc Robot stages, and Mega Man's 4 through 6 had 2 Wily Castles, but in general, it does point to a shorter stage length. So, once again, Mega Man 9 goes for short and sweet stages, a la the early Mega Man entries into the series. It's something that I feel is to Mega Man 9's benefit, as it really does make it feel like there's no bloat. On that topic of how Mega Man 9 has managed to feel like an NES sequel, I think it's worth discussing what makes a good sequel, because there are a couple of ways to look at this. Both Mega Man 8 and Mega Man in Base have brought about some truly interesting ideas that I, at least, would have loved to have seen further explored and expanded upon. For example, Mega Man 8 introduces the idea of utilizing interesting boss weapons to progress through a normal stage, which I think could have potentially been played up far further, as it was still somewhat limited in Mega Man 8. Both Mega Man 8 and Rockman and Forte have a plethora of interesting upgrades players can purchase in the shop that alter gameplay and add a fun twist to the Mega Man formula. Furthermore, Rockman and Forte introduce the idea of collectibles, and as someone who likes collecting things, I think it could have been fun to further play into that idea and really hone in on interesting challenges and collectibles to find, with a major reward for finding all of them. Rockman and Forte also introduced the idea of playing as 2 different characters. Is that an idea that should be played into further, with each character truly having unique routes and gameplay beats? So that's looking at this from how do you expand on the ideas introduced in earlier games and either enhance them or perfect them. After Mega Man 2, new abilities and ideas were slowly introduced to the Mega Man series many fans came to expect, in particular the slide and charge shot for Mega Man, but also Mega Man 6 and 7 both had the rush adapter for players, and this idea could have also been expanded for far more secrets and areas to explore. In that regard, Mega Man 4 introduced the idea of alternate routes, and this was further expanded to shortcuts, secrets, and multiple paths through the same stage. Meanwhile, Mega Man 2 is often considered the best game in the series, and especially at the time Mega Man 9 was released, I think that was the common sentiment. Mega Man 2 is one of the most basic Mega Man games, without all of those bells and whistles, and as I've mentioned, that was part of what made the game so fun. But this all presents a pretty big problem in creating a sequel to Mega Man, especially a decade later. After 9 entries into the classic series, you've now built up a fanbase who are all going to have drastically different ideas for what will make the best Mega Man sequel, and drastically different ideas about what they love about the Mega Man games. For some, a charge shot is the greatest innovation to the series, and Mega Man without his charge shot will feel stripped down, and like a worse version of the game or games they fell in love with. Others will love some of the innovations each new entry brought with it, and want to see what other creative new innovations or tweaks to the formula the team can come up with. And, of course, many think Mega Man 2 and or Mega Man 3 were peak classic Mega Man. The team strayed from what made the games great and want more of what they loved. It's a conundrum with no clear answer in terms of what makes a good sequel, because that answer, especially for a long-running series with so many entries, is going to be completely different per person. So I suppose the question now comes down to you. What in your eyes makes a good sequel? Is it a game that builds upon the foundation of its predecessor, but offers something fresh? Or is it something that retreads the ideas of the first game, but with a fresh coat of paint? Or does it completely depend on the game series? I do think part of it will come down to what is inspiring the creators of the game and driving their vision. Because so long as you have passionate creators making the game and vision they dream, I think you'll have a better product for it. I also imagine many Mega Man fans will also say, as long as there's a new game and it's fun, it doesn't matter which of those choices were made. For defeating Hornet Man, players will obtain his Hornet Chaser ability. So it's off to sting Splash Woman, the first female robot master. As the name implies, Splash Woman's stage brings Mega Man back to the water, meaning a return of Mega Man's standard water mechanics, as the swimming mechanics introduced in Mega Man 8 were dropped for both Mega Man in base and now Mega Man 9. Water stages are nothing new by this point, so it's pretty hard for Mega Man 9 to bring forward truly new concepts to the table. There have been so many water stages by now, I'm not going to read off the list of what each game introduced and how each game tried to innovate on the idea. Mega Man 9 has a few new enemy concepts, in particular this octopus who hides and shoots ink when it's provoked out, and a couple simple spiked wall drop challenges. These are all fine ideas, and it's a nice simple stage to play through while underwater, but nothing screams out to me as feeling particularly inspired. There is a return of the rising bubble concept from Wave Man stage of Mega Man 5. However, while Mega Man 5's rising bubbles were outside, and therefore used normal physics, here it's underwater, and therefore uses water physics. There's a couple enemies to trip players up, but really, these three screens of the bubbles rising are almost identical to what we saw in Wave Man stage. I feel like a fairly obvious way to use this challenge in a new way would be for players to cross bubbles like these horizontally over an insta-death pit, so I find it to be a bit of a shame that it really does feel like the same screens as before. Afterwards, though, is my favorite set of challenges from the stage, and actually, I think one of the strongest new concepts in Mega Man 9. There are rooms with these water platforms that shoot out from both sides of the player. Water slowly drains from the platforms, and once the water is empty, the platform disappears, creating a fantastic visual tell for players. It's a new way to handle a vertical ascent platform challenge, and I like that the platforms can come from both sides of the player at differing speeds, and again, with this really nice tell that keeps everything feeling especially readable and fair. This sequence of challenges is only 3 screens, with the first being an introductory sequence, and then the stakes rapidly ramping up with insta-death spikes on the floor, and then the middle of the room. So it's a short and sweet sequence that quickly plays out its concept and doesn't linger too long. Although, honestly, I like this concept so much, I think it would have been interesting to see more ways the developers could have played around with challenges around this. Make it through the watery depths, and players will reach Splash Woman. Splash Woman is a battle similar to Galaxy Man in that it's a set looping pattern. First she'll rise up to the top of the screen while singing out and calling for robot fish who will swim out from the sides of the screen, serving as destructible obstacles. Once she's at the top of the screen, she'll quickly move back and forth shooting down her laser trident projectile, meaning players will need to read the timing of this and weave in and out to avoid getting hurt. Finally, she'll slam down using her trident as a melee attack. After a quick recovery, she'll repeat the same pattern. As this is a looping pattern fight, that does make this an incredibly simple battle once players learn the pattern, and if every boss were like this, it probably wouldn't be all that fun, because I do find part of the fun of Mega Man battles to be the quick reactionary gameplay they can create. But looking at all of the Robot Master battles zoomed out, as a whole, I think this is another nice touch, as it's one of the only 2 looping boss pattern battles in Mega Man 9, helping to set it apart. Splash Woman is also somewhat weak to the Mega Buster, with it dealing 2 damage to her instead of 1, so that also makes this probably meant to be an easier fight for starting or struggling players, and marks a clear starting point in the 8 Robot Master cycle if players are struggling with the boss fights. So it's worth taking into account that the easier repeating pattern with the extra Mega Buster damage was potentially all done for that purpose. Splash Woman is weak to the Hornet Chaser ability, which is another one that logically makes sense in the way the ability actually functions. The Hornet Chaser attack will home in on enemies and bosses, and as Splash Woman is frequently over the player and out of reach, that makes this one of the very few attacks that would actually be able to hit her. It does make the fight incredibly simple, but again, I think that's likely the purpose. So Splash Woman might not be the most challenging boss fight, but I do think she helps round out the roster. For defeating Splash Woman, players will obtain her Laser Trident ability. So it's off to our final robot master, Concrete Man. Concrete Man's stage feels like it's set up as two halves. The first half is more focused on combat challenges, with occasional minor platforming, while the second half is focused on a couple of different platforming concepts. These challenges consist of platforms with no colliders, meaning players will fall through or be able to jump through them, and then these raising or lowering platforms, with arrows on them, plus their color distinction, very obviously indicating which ones will drop players and which ones will raise them up. As has been shown throughout Mega Man 9, the trick platform is introduced in a screen with no danger before the team uses it in tandem with enemies and insta-death spikes. It's definitely a more fair idea than some prior Mega Man games, where players had no visual distinction as to which platforms had collisions and which ones didn't. But because the platforms that don't have collision is so visually distinct, it honestly takes away any sort of challenge, at least for me. It's distinct enough that, for me, if you were to replace this with no tile whatsoever, which is really what this is minus the visual, I don't think it would change the challenge level at all. You could certainly argue that it creates a new visual players need to watch out for, and that's true. I just don't think this particular visual worked as feeling challenging. It does raise the question, again, when it comes to these sorts of traps, what's fair and what's fun? For some, this quick visual is better than what might feel like a guessing game or trial and error. For others, it might be fun for this to be a bit of a puzzle, where players would have to use something like the plug ball, which tracks along the ground, to determine which portions have colliders or don't, although that does mean this would have to be in the Wily stages. Or you can use enemies to help show off where the gap actually is. The game actually already does this in the second room with one of these traps, as the slidey enemy can only go back and forth across normal colliders, and they could have let this be a clever way for players to figure out what drops and doesn't drop. That does mean each of these traps would need to be well thought out to be fair, but I think that's a more interesting challenge myself. The raising and lowering platforms here are a fun concept, but they're also so simple in the normal iteration of this stage, I don't think there's really much challenge here at all. Although, to be fair, I have been playing these games since I was a child, and maybe newer players will find this to be a fun minor challenge. What's probably the most interesting element to Concrete Man's stage are these Paozo elephants found in the combat portion of the stage. I am basically saying elephant, by the way, as zo means elephant in Japanese. To my understanding, Pao is an onomatopoeia and can be used for a trumpet sound, specifically in relation to the sound that an elephant makes. So I'm pretty sure Paozo loosely translates to trumpet sound elephant, like calling something meow cat. Anyways, the Paozo is a series of short sub-bosses with two variations. The first has a red ball, which the elephant will simply roll and then suck back into its trunk. The second variation is a green ball, which the elephant will bounce before it rolls back to them. In classic Mega Man style, the team takes the same idea, but uses the stage layout to increase and change the difficulty. So our first elephant has a ladder in the middle of the stage, where players can very easily learn how the pattern works with absolute safety on the ladder. The second room has a more complex elephant, but with no safety ladder. And our final room has the more simple red ball elephant, but this time over insta-death pits. What makes this especially interesting, in relation to the ladder, is if players use the ladder to quickly defeat the Paozo, they might not have learned that the elephant sucking the red ball in will also pull Mega Man towards the elephant. Granted, the green ball elephant has the same functionality. This is a nice and simple challenge with a good build-up. I'm not sure if there actually needed to be a ladder in the first screen, as this isn't the most challenging enemy in the first place, and it could, as I mentioned, very slightly make it so players don't 100% learn the Paozo red ball's attack pattern before the stakes are ramped up. But, you know, maybe that was the point, and the team intentionally wanted this trade-off for taking the easy way out to defeat the Paozo. Either way, I think this is the classic example of how to take a good challenge and then use stage layout to alter the exact same challenge in an interesting way. Honestly, most of the challenge in the stage didn't really ramp up to be all that interesting to me, but I do like the Paozos in particular and the way they were handled. For making it through Trumpet Elephants, players will reach Concrete Man. As far as I can tell, Concrete Man has a variety of moves he can perform and is truly random in which choice he'll make. There's a chance the team used player detectors to determine the range of the player from Concrete Man, and then used percentages to decide which attack he was most likely to use, which was a tactic common in Mega Man's 4 and 5, but I'm honestly not sure if that's the case here. Concrete Man will either use his Concrete Shot, which will lob a few concrete slabs at Mega Man, launch across the screen with a bashing attack, or try to leap above the player's position and then slam down into the ground. There's also a little more complexity to the attacks themselves. If a concrete slab hits Mega Man, it will temporarily freeze the player, turning them into concrete, and exposing Mega Man to one of Concrete Man's other attacks. If the concrete hits the ground, it creates a temporary block pattern where it lands. These blocks can be destroyed with Concrete Man's weakness of the Laser Trident, or Concrete Man himself will destroy them during his bash attack or his slam attack. Like other slam attacks we've seen throughout the series, when Concrete Man slams the ground, it will shake the screen, and if players are touching the ground, they'll temporarily get stunned from the force of the shake. However, players can jump in the air to avoid getting stunned. What this all makes for is a fight that's never too difficult, as there's only a variety of 3 attacks Concrete Man might use, but still fun and reactionary, as players won't know which attack will come next, and the lob shot, in particular, can be more difficult to avoid, especially if players trap themselves near the edge of the screen. That actually makes Concrete Man the only Robot Master in Mega Man 9 who randomly selects from 3 attacks to choose, making him unique amongst the roster, and possibly one of my favorite Robot Master fights in Mega Man 9, due to that reactionary nature of it. Concrete Man is weak to Splash Woman's Laser Trident, and like we've seen many times before, the Laser Trident will not only dish out massive damage to Concrete Man, but also destroy his projectile attack, making for a slightly easier fight for players in that regard. So another great Robot Master fight from Mega Man 9, making for a full roster of fun and unique battles, with each boss really standing out in terms of their attack patterns compared to the other bosses within the roster. For defeating Concrete Man, that means we've now completed all of the Robot Masters, meaning it's time for another cutscene. Players will obtain a memory circuit board from whichever boss they defeat last, and Otto will tap into it to see why the robots went crazy. As it turns out, surprise, surprise, Dr. Wily was behind everything. The robots seem unconcerned with being scrapped when their expiration date runs out, but Wily coerces them into being reprogrammed by him, tricking them into thinking it's so they can continue being useful to humans. Robot ethics aside, this is the smoking gun evidence that Mega Man, Roll, and Otto need in order to prove Dr. Light's innocence. But Wily manages to break into Dr. Light's lab and both quickly and easily steal the memory chip. How convenient. So with that, Dr. Wily's castle unlocks for players to progress to. Before touching on Dr. Wily's castle, it's time to go over all of the various special weapons players will have unlocked in Mega Man 9. I'm typically a Mega Buster only player, as it's simply how I enjoy playing the Mega Man games, but I've been making an effort throughout this series to use all of the different weapons so I can better analyze and discuss this element to the games. Before I even touch on the weapons themselves though, something I particularly liked about Mega Man 9 is that, more so than other games, it really felt like many of the enemies and challenges throughout the stages were specifically thought up with the idea of an ideal weapon that would help players through said challenge. That, in and of itself, really helps elevate how useful these weapons ended up feeling, because there were constantly areas of the stages that felt tailored around these. For defeating Galaxy Man, players will obtain the Black Hole Bomb. The Black Hole Bomb will suck both enemies and projectiles into it, working as an incredibly destructive AoE. While the Black Hole Bomb will automatically be shot in the direction players are facing, they can actually control its height by pressing up and down, and choose when to activate the bomb. That makes the Black Hole Bomb an incredibly strong attack, but one that's also balanced out by being slow in its movement. Players also still need to be relatively accurate with it, because while it does have an AoE range where it will suck enemies and projectiles in, that's still limited. All of this makes for a fun attack to use that comes incredibly in handy for various situations. For defeating Jewel Man, players will obtain the Jewel Satellite. The Jewel Satellite is Mega Man 9's shield attack, where a shield of 4 jewels will circle around Mega Man. Players can shoot the shield in the direction they're facing, or run around with it to prevent them from taking damage or getting knocked back. Unlike prior games though, the Jewel Satellite is incredibly durable, with it destroying most enemies on touch, and not getting destroyed itself when that happens. There are a few enemies this doesn't work on, but for the ones it does, it makes those sections an absolute cakewalk. While that does perhaps make the attack a little overpowered, I think it was probably necessary as, in general, while I like the idea of these attacks, they end up being pretty useless in the grand scheme of things. But here, the Jewel Satellite actually feels genuinely useful, and in particular, will make Galaxy Man's stage an absolute breeze. For defeating Plug Man, players will obtain the Plug Ball. The Plug Ball is similar to other attacks we've seen in the past, with it falling to the ground and then tracking along the ground. The attack tracks up walls and across the ceiling, making it more useful than, say, the Bubble Lead of Mega Man 2 or Water Wave of Mega Man 5, which only track along the ground, and more like Snake Man's Search Snake of Mega Man 3. There are plenty of situations in Mega Man 9 where this attack feels like the ideal attack to use, especially if there's an enemy in some sort of pit ahead of the player, or even on a wall ahead of them that they can use the Plug Ball to track up and hit. So, because situations were presented that made this useful, it becomes a fun attack to use. For defeating Tornado Man, players will obtain the Tornado Blow. The Tornado Blow is another one of the many full-screen attacks in the Mega Man series. The thing that separates the Tornado Blow from other full-screen attacks is that it will temporarily lower gravity, meaning players can jump higher while the attack is happening. Granted, that's a very short period of time. The attack is also somewhat similar to Gravity Man's Gravity Hold of Mega Man 5, in that enemies will be tossed off-screen, and therefore not give players any enemy drops. However, unlike the Gravity Hold, which had to first damage enemies enough before it could flip them, the Tornado Blow immediately tosses normal enemies off-screen without worrying about their health bar. That means this attack can come in handy for easily clearing a packed or difficult-looking room filled with enemies. So it's useful, and to that end, I like it more than something like the Gravity Hold, and part of the balancing seems to come in it not giving players item drops. So I get that touch, but I still think the Rain Flush of Mega Man 4 is my favorite iteration of this type of attack. For defeating Magma Man, players will obtain the Magma Bazooka. The Magma Bazooka is a spread shot, but with a few twists to it. For one, players can actually charge up the Magma Bazooka to deal triple the damage. Next, each fireball of the spread shot deals individual damage, and if each shot hits an enemy or boss at the same time, all of those shots will concurrently deal damage, regardless of iframes, meaning you can triple whatever damage you're dealing out. Finally, the shot is slow, and players can't rapid fire this one out, as only one sequence of shots can be out on the screen at a time. So this can come in handy thanks to the spread shot nature of it, but due to its slow nature, I found myself not using it too frequently. That said, I do like the concept, and it's interesting to have a charged spread shot. For defeating Hornet Man, players will obtain the Hornet Chaser. The Hornet Chaser will home in on both enemies and items, meaning players can shoot out Hornets and let them take care of business. What's especially nice is that element of them homing in on items, as if they grab an item, they'll immediately return and bring it back to Mega Man. As such, there are actually out-of-reach items placed along the stages, where it turns out the Hornet Chaser is the intended way to get those items. The Hornet Chaser feels like an incredibly powerful tool thanks to this combination. Even though the Hornet Chaser isn't the most powerful attack on its own, because it returns items back to players, that means it will frequently grab weapon ammo recharges when enemies drop them, refilling that ammo it might feel like players were wasting. That makes this a fun attack to use everywhere, but I do wonder if it was maybe a little too powerful. For defeating Splash Woman, players will obtain the Laser Trident. The Laser Trident ignores colliders and shields, making it the perfect tool for dealing with shielded enemies. It's quick and fast, and as that is the only conceit to it, it has its place amongst Mega Man's arsenal as something that's extra useful for specific circumstances. For defeating Concrete Man, players will obtain the Concrete Shot. While the Concrete Shot deals damage to enemies, the most interesting part to it is that it will turn into a temporary concrete platform after hitting the ground or a wall. This means players can use it to platform, or they can use it in specific later stages to block laser beams, as it creates a temporary ground tile. On top of that, the concrete can be used to freeze certain things, like the giant fire beams that shoot out from Magma Man's stage, which is played up in Dr. Wily's Stage 1. I like that this tool does more than attack, creating some mini puzzle elements to Mega Man 9. So that rounds out the arsenal of weapons Mega Man can find in Mega Man 9. And this just might be the best overall boss weapons as a whole I think we've seen so far. There are individual weapons in prior Mega Man games I might like a little more than some of these for various reasons, but all of these weapons are unique and serve specific purposes, and they all feel useful in their own way. And it's rare for a Mega Man game to achieve that, and I think that could be a big reason for Mega Man 9's popularity. I think I've usually been using Mega Man 4 as the benchmark for good and balanced boss weapons, and Mega Man 9 might just surpass that. Although, as I mentioned earlier, that's probably thanks, in large part, to the team designing challenges and enemies that feel like they had specific weapon abilities in mind for how to better overcome them. With all of the Robot Master abilities in hand, it's time to head to Dr. Wily's castle. Cue the same Dr. Wily music that Mega Man 2 used. As I typically do with these, instead of talking about each individual stage, I'll go over the stages as a whole and highlight portions that stand out to me, and then go over each individual boss players will be coming across. Dr. Wily's castle has none of the surprise castles of Mega Man's 4 through 6, which is something I'm glad about. I also think that this set of stages is perhaps one of the most challenging set of Wily stages we've seen outside of Mega Man and Bass. Beyond the stages themselves being difficult, like Mega Man 2, which Mega Man 9 was highly influenced by, weapon energy carries across stages, meaning players will want to be careful about how much energy they're using, or fill up when they can, as not having enough can lead to trouble down the line. Although, like those NES games, if you die and continue, you'll start back at the beginning of the current Wily stage you're on, but with full ammo, so it's not like you can get completely stuck. It's also worth noting that if players leave the Wily stages to save the game or fill up on items at the shop, they'll completely lose their progress in the castle. This is unlike, say, Mega Man 7, which lets players stock up in between stages, and does help establish that classic feel that this sequence is the final set of challenges. Although, because 9's final challenges feel notably more difficult than most of the other games, that can definitely make this decision sting more for many players. Ironically, I actually think the first stage is the most challenging of the bunch, with players truly needing to understand how their weapons can help them progress. With the use of Rush, you don't actually need to use any of the boss weapons here, which is a cool choice, but it certainly feels like they're the intended way to complete the stage that the designers were thinking about. But let's run through some of Stage 1. There are these robots with giant shields who players can lure into dropping the shield to defeat, or quickly obliterate with the laser trident. There are these propeller platforms which are clearly meant to be used in conjunction with the tornado blow to rise up, but players can use a combination of Rush Coil and Rush Jet to avoid using them instead. I don't recommend it, but you can. A 1-up partway through the stage is meant to be obtained by understanding the Hornet Chaser will grab faraway items. There's a restock section right afterwards, before a difficult sequence of horizontal fire beams. I actually didn't know what was probably the correct way to progress through here my first time replaying Mega Man 9, and was able to get by with Rush Coil. Granted, it was very difficult to figure out the proper timing. Meanwhile, what I think was likely the intended way was to use the concrete shot to temporarily freeze these beams and use them as platforms to progress. That said, this is also difficult to do as the concrete shot will drop down, and any miss from the concrete shot, or not jumping properly, will likely result in an immediate death. I actually found in doing both, while I do think the concrete shot is the intended way, Rush Coil was the easier and quicker way once you know how. There's a spiked platform challenge, and it's clear the intention is to cross with Rush Jet. But you can also use the concrete shot to create platforms and cross this alternate way. It's difficult to time properly, especially with the limited jumping space, but you can. So while all of this is challenging, with some variations of how to progress through each of these challenges more or less difficult than the other, it is cool that there are multiple solutions to the same problem. Again, this is a very tough stage, and it really feels like a big leap in its difficulty, especially the horizontal lava beams. I do actually sort of like this reversal in what I think of as expected difficulty, where you usually see the harder stages come last, as that's a pretty standard difficult build-up, but in this way, you can get past a difficulty spike and then take a little breather. Stage 2 contains the concept of fake blocks that players will witness being created, meaning they'll have to either quickly destroy the machines that create these fake blocks to give themselves an easier time, or quickly memorize the stage layout before attempting its challenges. This is a really clever concept, and far more interesting than the invisible block sequence that was in Concrete Man's stage. Wily Stage 3 sees a zero-gravity concept, where players will slowly rise up and be propelled backwards from shooting the Mega Buster. In this way, players will not only shoot to destroy obstacles, but also avoid enemies and insta-death spikes. It's a fantastic and creative idea, although I am a little critical of the fact that the final screen of this concept contains a surprise Boom-Bee catcher who will grab players if they accidentally fly past a ladder to proceed and run them into an insta-death spike trap. This is probably going to be a litmus test for what you think is a good Mega Man challenge, and one that hinges too deeply on trial and error. Because, as far as I can tell, there's no way to predict this Boom-Bee catcher will show up and quickly drag you to your death. But when players die, the checkpoint is actually relatively close, and they'll then know the danger for next time and be actively trying to avoid it. There's an incredibly tempting M-Tank here, where players will be more prone to accidentally deleting themselves if they go for, as they'll need to hurry away from touching ceiling spikes above after getting it. That in and of itself is a great way to set up the trap. But again, this trap is one that only returning players will understand exists, and they need to attempt to avoid. If you know it exists, it can still be a nice challenge to not set off the trap. So that does lead to the question, if this is still a nice challenge even when players know it's there, did the surprise factor add anything of value, or was it unfair? I know a lot of people think of the Mega Man games as trial and error games, and while there's certainly some truth to that, I think the same thing could be said of most games. So the question then comes down to, how steep do you think the punishment for a trial and error portion should be? The plus side to this is, it's a shock, but if you have some lives, it doesn't actually set you back very far at all, and it definitely works in that way. The downside is, Mega Man is a lives-based game, and if you're low on lives, this could just be the thing that sets you all the way back to the start of the stage, or makes it so you're that much closer to being sent all the way back from dying later on in the stage, if you feel like you unfairly died here. Again, for something there was no way to predict. In this specific case, I think the downsides outweigh the positives. I like the trap itself, but I do think this would have worked better if there were some tell that moving too far past the ladder would trigger a Boom-Bee catcher. There are a number of camouflage medals in the latter Wily stages, but in particular, 3 immediately after the Boom-Bee catcher trap, which are medals using Mega Man's 1-up helmet as a disguise, and instead shoot players. These are hilarious, and I absolutely love the idea of this mimic-type enemy. But to relate this back, imagine if the punishment for not knowing this was a trap the first time you encountered it was insta-death, instead of what it currently is, which is an avoidable projectile shot. Would you think that elevated the game because Mega Man is known as a trial and error game? I'd argue no, it would have made the game worse, because the punishment for something a player couldn't have possibly known was too high. The section immediately after the Boom-Bee catcher and 1-up traps is a platform sequence over an insta-death pit with insta-kill spikes above. It's pretty rare to see this combination in Mega Man, as it is extra challenging with players needing to watch their jump height while also jumping high enough to clear a gap, so I think it stands out as a nice challenge for the end of the game, especially with these Machine Gun Joes who nicely add to the challenge. The final Wily stage includes these lasers, which players will need to block by creating a platform with a concrete shot, which is a fun idea, and begins to show the type of unique platforming that might have been fun if this were a permanent ability that the team truly played off of. While I touched on the challenges that stood out the most to me, most of the general platforming and enemy challenges throughout these Wily stages are a genuine step up in difficulty from not only the stages of Mega Man 9, but most of the Wily stages from the prior Mega Man games before Mega Man and Bass. I think this is, honestly, one of the reasons I wasn't the biggest fan of Mega Man 9 when I first played it back on the Wii. The ramped up challenge of Mega Man 9's Wily stages was so much steeper, it got to the point where I wasn't having as much fun, and I think I recall leaving at one point to go to the shop, possibly during the boss rush, and then returning only to realize I'd have to start all over, which made me groan in frustration. That said, the fact that you can purchase so many items from the shop and stock up in a way that you can cheese pretty much every fight with a total of 9 E-tanks and 1 M-tank, plus use Eddy, half damage, and spike guards. Really, if you're willing to grind, I think most players who've beaten other classic Mega Man games should be able to make it through this. And replaying Mega Man 9 a few times for this video, I didn't find the Wily stages nearly as challenging as I remembered, but still definitely difficult. So this is one of those elements that I do think could probably make or break a Mega Man 9 fan, because as always, it's a truly rewarding feeling to conquer and master a major challenge, which is a part of the joy of the classic Mega Man games. But a certain level of challenge can become too steep for some to be enjoyable, and even feel like it's worth the effort. For completing Wily Stage 1, players will come to the Spike Pushers boss. The concept here is a tug-and-war between the Spike Pushers and Mega Man, with a spike ball in the middle. If the boss shoots the spike ball, it will move closer to Mega Man, and if players shoot the spike ball, it will move closer to the boss. Touching it will immediately kill the player, while if it touches the boss, it will destroy that specific Spike Pusher, and a new Spike Pusher will be pumped out from the factory to continue the tug-of-war. The twists here are that there are 4 Spike Pushers, and that they can evolve. Destroying a Spike Pusher will pump out a new version, which just could be a Spike Pusher who has a charge shot that will move the Spike Ball far faster. If the ball reaches the end of its lane, the Spike Pusher will instead evolve to shoot a projectile aimed at the player's current position. While I think it can be difficult to defeat this boss without getting hit, if you're not worried about that and simply want to destroy the boss, it's pretty simple. Players can completely ignore a couple of these lanes and easily destroy the boss through a war of attrition without even needing to dodge too much. It's a fun idea, and you are consistently engaged with the fight, as you'll be regularly shooting and pushing these spiked balls, but the challenge doesn't present itself in a way that ends up being too interesting to me, as it ends up feeling more like a case of rapid firing without needing to worry about too much else. As Wily Stage 1 is such a challenging level, this could actually feel like a bit of a relief due to its lower difficulty, and I like that the team was trying to come up with more interesting gimmicks. For completing Wily Stage 2, players will come to the Mega Mech Shark. This is a 3-phase boss fight where players will first need to destroy the tail of this mech shark, then a bottom area, and finally the actual head. Each phase of the boss fight presents a different challenge. The first sees the boss launch a series of destructible homing missiles at players. The second has the base dropping out mini destructible mech sharks. The bottom of the Mega Mech Shark is spiked, and players will need to shoot the capsules that spawn the mini sharks, meaning most of the challenge is really trying to jump and shoot the spawners without accidentally grazing the spiked bottom of the Mega Mech Shark. Finally, the third phase sees the shark shoot out sets of laser beams at the player, with this one being especially dangerous as the laser beams are difficult to avoid and deal a large chunk of damage. The one consistency across all phases is that the boss is always moving up and down, meaning that the target is always moving, creating and taking away offensive opportunities. Going Mega Buster only, this boss can be a time sink, with the second phase being particularly rough. It's a good challenge, mind you, just time consuming within the context of there being 3 different phases. I actually like that the boss hovering up and down deeply affects the challenge of this, with it easier to hurt the boss when he's coming down, as players can use the fact that when they shoot a projectile, it remains the same height, meaning the boss will be dropping down into your shots. So you can make this fight a lot easier on yourself if you use a little intuition. For example, the laser trident will shred through the first and third phase. It does deal massive damage to the second phase, but struggles against the baby sharks. And that's where you could think the thing you need to damage is above you, so you should probably switch to the tornado blow, and this will take care of it pretty much immediately. For the third phase, if you're worried about taking damage, it's a projectile attack, so here you can use the black hole bomb to suck in the projectiles and deal some damage without needing to worry about taking hits. So I think this is a good boss battle with 3 distinct phases that present their own unique challenges with the Mega Buster and proper solutions with boss weapons. It is on the longer side, but it's fitting for a boss. I do get a little annoyed running into it during the middle of the optional special stage, simply due to its length, but I like it here at the end of Wily Stage 2. For completing Wily Stage 3, players will come to the Twin Devil. After the Yellow Devil Mark II, and Green Devil of Mega Man 8, it's time for another new spin on the same concept, this time with the Twin Devil. I'm not counting the Green Devil of Mega Man and Bass, by the way, as that one doesn't turn into goop and swap sides. The conceit of this fight is that, unlike the traditional Yellow Devil of the past, which is only on one side of the screen, there's a Twin Devil on both sides, and you'll now be reacting to blobs coming from both of them at the same time. Like the other Yellow Devil fights before, this is a little bit memorization and a little bit reactionary. It can be a challenging fight at first when you're purely reacting, but once you recognize the pattern, it's always the same, and the fight becomes significantly easier, as you just need to remember when to jump and when not to jump. So to that end, like the Yellow Devil of Mega Man 1, I do think this fight can feel a little tedious, as once you know the boss pattern, it really is following your dance steps, shooting when the opportunity arises, and then repeating the exact same thing until you whittle down the boss's health, with or without their weakness. It's a fine variation on the Yellow Devil concept, so I don't mind its inclusion, but it's also not my favorite fight due to the nature of it. I wouldn't even call it as intense as the original Yellow Devil fight, as I actually find this one a little easier to avoid getting hurt during. For completing Wily Stage 4, players will make it to the standard boss rush. Outside of the fact there's a mini stage here at the beginning of the boss rush, there isn't anything notable here that's different from before. So let's move on. For finishing the boss rush, players will come to Wily Machine 9. As is often the case, the Wily Machine has two phases. The first of these phases is incredibly unique, with the dinosaur-looking Wily Machine 9 lobbing dinosaur eggs out of its mouth. The goal here is to bounce the egg back at the machine using your projectile. If the egg hits Mega Man at any point, it will explode, hurting him, and if players are able to bounce the egg against the Wily Machine a total of 3 times, it will explode on the Wily Machine. However, it needs to explode on Wily Machine's head in order to actually injure it. Meanwhile, Phase 2 is sort of like an advanced Friender robot from Mega Man 2. Those robots would stand still and spew out fire beams in an arc that players would have to jump over. Wily Machine 9 Phase 2 sees the dinosaur robot either hover back and forth across the screen, lift off and hover back and forth across the top of the screen before slamming down, or stop to shoot Friender-style arced fireballs. Phase 1 is a nice simple challenge, clearly readable, but still difficult in its own right. Because the egg bounces off of the Wily Machine, and the machine hovers back and forth, that can alter your perception of how the egg will bounce. It's completely fair, as the egg has a nice big bounce to it, but can still be surprisingly challenging. The only ding on this is that it can feel like it takes a while to destroy Phase 1, as this is the only way to injure the Wily Machine here, and it has no true weakness. In a vacuum, that's fine, but considering this is the first phase of a 3-phase fight, it means that players could potentially be repeating this over and over again if they're out of E or M tanks, and still trying to learn some of the later boss patterns and weaknesses. Phase 2 is an interesting one, because as I mentioned, it's an advanced version of the Friender fight. That means, like the Friender fights, if you leap towards the fire from far away, you should have a small window to clear this without getting injured. The catch is, he'll oftentimes use the attack when he's practically right next to the player, making it incredibly difficult to pull this off. From a weakness standpoint though, you can use the black hole bomb here to suck up the fire beam, completely nullifying the attack, which is a nice touch. Phase 2 is also extremely weak to the concrete shot. So while I like the idea of Phase 1, I think I actually find myself liking Phase 2 a little more, as there's some alteration to Wily's patterns and interesting variety in how to deal with it. Destroy Wily Phase 2, and players will get no break as it's straight onto the Wily Capsule. The Wily Capsule is pretty much the same thing every Wily Capsule is. Dr. Wily will disappear and reappear, then perform his attack. Although this time around, in between every attack, Wily will have a fake-out appearance where he's briefly vulnerable and quickly disappears again. In this iteration, the Wily Capsule only has 2 attacks. One is an attack we've seen multiple times by now, which is in Wily creating 4 projectiles, which after being created, will shoot towards Mega Man. It's not as difficult to dodge as other versions of the Wily Capsule, but it is still fairly challenging to avoid, making for a good attack. The second attack he has is brand new, where he'll shoot 3 projectiles at the ground that will then track the ground, and 3 projectiles in the air that then fall straight down. It's incredibly similar to Plugman's boss fight, although with players needing to deal with far more projectiles at once. There are openings that are created for players to avoid, so I found this to be a fun attack pattern in particular. Whenever I messed up, I very much felt like it was my fault, and it was fun to try and quickly jump to a safe gap. So in that regard, I found this to be one of the more fun iterations of the Wily Capsules we've seen. Granted, I do think the Wily Capsule needs to be retired, as, including Mega Man and Bass, this is now the 7th iteration of the exact same concept introduced in Mega Man 4. For defeating the Wily Capsule, players will reobtain the memory circuit board to help prove Dr. Light's innocence. Dr. Wily will once again beg for forgiveness, for the 10th time, and I absolutely love that Mega Man 9 straight up calls that out here, with Mega Man using Rush to show Dr. Wily how many times he's asked for forgiveness and never changed his ways. In a nice touch, there's a brief Mega Man and Bass reference here, showing that Mega Man and Bass is now canon to the classic Mega Man series. So get with it, Capcom! I wish the game had been in Legacy Collection too. Instead of truly reacting to how many times Mega Man and Wily have been through this song and dance, Wily claims Dr. Light was captured by one of his fake police officers and is imprisoned. Proto Man points out this is a trap, and it's the fake Dr. Light robot used to create Wily's fake memory that was shown at the beginning of the game, which started everything in the first place. But Mega Man falls for it anyways, leading to the Dr. Light robot to explode, Wily to escape, and Proto Man to once again save Mega Man, returning everything to the status quo as Dr. Light is proven innocent. Not the happiest ending, but at least it's something different, and I like seeing Wily use one of his schemes and how naive Mega Man can be to escape. Cue the credits! In a fun credit scroll, we get to see images of all of the robot masters acting normally, helping with day-to-day things like watering plants or helping to create a hot tub. Before wrapping this up, there's more to Mega Man 9 I mentioned at the start of the game, with plenty of additional options and DLC. So that leads us into the first of these new additions, challenges. The challenge list is a nice addition that adds specific challenges for players to try to knock out, like beating 4 stages without using a special weapon or defeat bosses quickly. It's a nice additional touch, although some of them are kind of insane, like Last Man Standing, which asks players to defeat every boss with only 1 pixel of energy left. So I suppose that does bring about the question of, is including unlockable achievements and challenges a good thing, a negative thing, or something that has no bearing on you whatsoever? Because this is a totally optional feature to interact with, and it is a simple list showing, yes you did the thing, or no you didn't do the thing. For a time, achievements became a huge deal once Xbox incorporated it into its games, giving gamers a score they could rack up by obtaining and completing various achievements. So for some players, this is not only a fun metric to go for, but adds replay value to the game as it gives you a tangible goal to strive for. It also plays into that collector mentality of trying to hit 100%. But how much fun these challenges are depend on the achievement themselves and what it's asking of players. There's progression-based achievements, like ones you'd earn for defeating a boss, which are probably a little pointless, but it might add a bit of a jolt to keep on moving forwards for some players, and it probably means a little more in games with secret and hidden bosses. From there though, it sort of depends on just how hard the achievement is to hit. If achievements feel manageable but interesting, that's the sweet spot. But something like defeating every boss with 1 piece of health left, is that even a good challenge? It's certainly hard to do, and I suppose like most things, it could be subjectively fun to prove your mastery of the game, knowing how to purposefully take hits or avoid them, but I think most people who have the itch to 100% this list will groan at it. Or truly hardcore, ask players to clear the game 30 times. Now you're just asking players to repetitively finish something purely for an arbitrary piece of text. To the bright side, if someone is that obsessed with Mega Man 9, they are getting a little mini token for it. I want to be clear, this is me nitpicking, and I really don't care that much about the achievements or challenges in Mega Man 9, but it's still interesting to think about. The most interesting thing really comes down to, how does this affect someone's experience playing the game overall? I'd imagine most people either ignore these challenges entirely, or go through a few that sound interesting or fun, and then fall off after that. Then there will be a hardcore group of players who try to collect them all, and that does make it seem like a bit of unobtrusive fun. However, I do think this can alter the way that some people play the game, even if it's subconsciously. Certain achievement hunters, completionists, or people who are curious might peruse this list and alter the way they play, even on an initial playthrough, in order to hit some of these achievements. To that end, they might be making the game more fun for themselves than they otherwise would have playing normally, or not as fun, and that's why something as minor as what feels like additional optional content actually can have an overall effect on someone's enjoyment of the game. That achievement I was sort of poking fun of, where you're asked to defeat every boss with one piece of health remaining, is one I could easily see a small subsect of players, and a very small one at that, mind you, attempting to go for, and potentially causing so much frustration and angst for some who fail that it leaves a bitter taste in their mouths of their overall impression of the game. When an achievement is thrown in your face as you finish a boss, it can also take you out of the game and the moment a little bit. Like, oh, I got an achievement? How did I do this? How do I get another one? It's a small thing, but it can break immersion a little bit. Or it can add to the moment of victory and the spoils of your success. I do think for a short action platform game like Mega Man, the challenges list was a fun addition that adds more than it takes away. In particular, I had fun trying to beat the bosses quickly and get those achievements, and was pretty pleased there was an achievement for my preferred style of play, Mega Buster only. It is worth noting that you don't actually get anything for completing any of the achievements, or even all of them, at least as far as I know, so that does add to the totally optional nature of them, which is nice for players who don't want to go for all of the super difficult and time-consuming achievements, but might sting a little bit for players who do get everything. To that end, I think something super minor works as a decent reward, like a new background for the title screen, because it's not something that most players will mind missing, but it does at least give players something for their hard work. Another new feature to Mega Man 9 is in a time attack mode. This acts like any other time attack, with players having a timer at the top of the screen and seeing how quickly they can beat each stage. There's not much else to comment on this, but I do think it's a nice additional feature for those who want to practice speedrunning. One of the most interesting features is a brand new challenge stage, which I guess people dub Fake Man Stage, that was only included as DLC and can only be accessed through the time attack. Fake Man Stage takes players across a cityscape with some of my favorite music of Mega Man 9, and sees players take on a remix of some enemy challenges from the main game, as well as every sub-boss as they progress through the level. I don't think anything here approaches Dr. Wily Capsule levels of difficulty, and if players made it through Mega Man 9, I don't think it's the most challenging stage. It's fun, but it is long. My largest gripe with the stage is that, on top of refighting every sub-boss, players will also need to refight the Mega Mech Shark of Wily Capsule 2. Again, not because it's hard, but because it's a pretty time-consuming fight. From the standpoint of this being a time attack level, I get it, as you're trying to race across the clock for a good time, and that's an interesting fight. The thing about it is, this is already a fairly long stage, and unlike the normal game, players only have one life with no E-tanks or other special help tools. So if at any point the player dies, including during the boss fight, it can be a slog to run all the way back through the stage, which in particular for me, felt like a slog thanks to the Mega Mech Shark. Something I think this stage does highlight, though, is how much the live system makes a difference for making Mega Man feel fair. Because ultimately, dying from losing too many lives and getting a game over in Mega Man is an annoyance because of how much longer it makes the run back. This specifically rears its head with the boss of the stage, Fake Man. Fake Man is a fun boss fight where he'll specifically respond and use his shooting pattern as a response to players shooting. His attack pattern response is a lot more complex than most bosses who respond to the player shooting, making it a little more difficult to read that this is what he's doing. But it's always the same every time, so it does eventually create a nice rhythm for players to learn and avoid. The thing is, because players only have one life, it's really hard to learn any of this, because a death to Fake Man means being sent back to the very beginning of the stage. With the normal live system of Mega Man, Yes, there's a chance this would happen if players lost too many lives throughout the stage, but that was in their power to control by learning the stage and playing well. Once players reach a boss, no matter what, you're going to have to go through a period of learning their pattern. It doesn't matter what game or what boss, you'll never know beforehand what their attacks will be or how to respond to them. So even in having one life in the main game, that creates enough opportunity for bosses to feel fair, because players were given an opportunity to learn some of their attacks and how to respond. And in dying, the players have a checkpoint right before the boss, meaning that while, yes, they have limited attempts due to the live system, it's not as unfair as I think Lives detractors and Mega Man detractors will have you think. So at the end of the day, Fake Man stage simply becomes a stage with a drastically longer boss runback for any failure, leading to those failures feeling far more frustrating. It definitely raises the stakes for fighting Fake Man, so to that end, it can also make the victory feel all that much sweeter. But for me, it made me appreciate the normal live system of Mega Man all that much more, as this punishment was brutal enough that it made me want to look up boss strategies rather than discovering it on my own. Fake Man himself is a fun boss fight that I think would have fit in with any of the Robot Masters. Jewel Man's Jewel Satellite is particularly effective against him, as it will shield players from all of his attacks while he's going off on his attack pattern, and also deals more damage to him. So a good boss fight, I just wish there wasn't such a massive run back to attempt it every time. Hero and Superhero mode were also introduced as DLC to Mega Man 9. These are far more challenging versions of the game, with Hero mode being hard mode and Superhero mode being extra hard mode. Both modes alter enemies and enemy placement, as well as obstacles and obstacle placement. For example, enter Galaxy Man stage in Hero mode, and you'll see the teleport launchers placed in completely different configurations from before. Enter Superhero mode, and you'll see the swinging platforms of Jewel Man stage mixed with the dropping platforms of Concrete Man stage, with a dose of enemies to try and knock you back into the instant death pit below while attempting these platform challenges. Jewel Man stage even includes invisible Shadow Mega Man spawners, and while they're pretty easy to kill, it does feel a bit like BS the first time you encounter this. For me, a lot of what these modes did was cement just how well designed the Mega Man games are in balancing their difficulty, because any developer can go all out like this and make extreme challenges. But finding that balance of unique and fun ideas that are fair, challenging, and typically not over the top can be difficult to do. And that's not me ragging on these modes, by the way. I appreciate that instead of making enemies hurt players for more or something basic like that, these modes are actually thought out, with enemy and obstacle placements specifically designed for more progressive difficulties, which definitely feel like the correct way to tune difficulty in a Mega Man game over simply adjusting the values, which is a lazy solution that doesn't work for everything, and I talked about in my Mega Man 2 video. These are optional modes for testing your mettle, and I think they're fun additions, especially for Legacy Collection 2, where they weren't paid DLC but included. In another brand new concept and DLC to Mega Man, there's the Endless Attack mode. This mode sees players go through a sequence of mini-challenges before fighting a boss, and then repeating that pattern indefinitely. Each mini-challenge is a series of screens before players will teleport to a new mini-challenge sequence of screens. I could be mistaken, as I've only played Endless Attack a little bit, but I don't know if it necessarily gets more challenging over time, but rather will end up repeating screens at a certain point. For example, in one of my runs, my first challenge was in this area with Ice Ground, Insta-Death Spikes, and SZA Scissors trying to end me. Later on, I came across the exact same sequence at around screen 66, and I don't think it was any different. This Endless mode is sort of like a Mega Man roguelike. The challenges you'll come to are random, and the goal is simply to make it to the furthest screen that you can. You'll have your full set of tools, including rush and boss weapons, but no E-tanks and no lives. There's nothing you get for making it far, like upgrades to make future runs easier, so I suppose that's where it isn't like a modern roguelike. The mini-challenges are all well thought out, with some actually pretty challenging, and even a repeat of some challenges from past games, like this Heat Man invisible block sequence that I somehow butchered, even though I can pretty much always pull it off when actually playing Heat Man stage from so much practice. There's not enough meat here, in my opinion, to warrant a full game or anything like that, as you'd really want some sort of reward for making progress, like an upgrade system if this were a standalone game. But as an additional mode to Mega Man 9, it's a fun way to keep playing and experiencing new ideas and challenges, and see how far you can make it. Finally, the last DLC to Mega Man 9 I haven't mentioned is one of the most interesting ones, and that's the ability to play the game as Proto Man. For the most part, Proto Man is your way to play Mega Man 9 with Mega Man's moveset from Mega Man 4. Proto Man controls the exact same as Mega Man, but can slide and has a charge shot, with the charge shot about the same size as it is from Mega Man 4. Like in Mega Man 4, the regular pea shooter deals 1 damage, and the charge shot deals 3 damage. However, there are some major trade-offs for playing as Proto Man. The most immediately obvious are that he takes double damage than Mega Man and has a greater knockback. This makes every enemy and boss far more dangerous, especially enemies near insta-death traps who before might not have knocked Mega Man into it, but just might knock Proto Man into it. However, another major drawback to playing as Proto Man is that while Mega Man can have 3 pellets on screen at once, Proto Man can only have 2 pellets on screen at once. This can drastically affect the difficulty at various points, because you just might not realize how much you come to rely on rapid firing the Mega Buster at various points, and how that single extra allowed bullet can make a huge difference. This does help balance Proto Man in a way where the charge shot becomes a little more useful, because the normal pea shooter is even less effective than before. However, the game isn't at all balanced towards Proto Man's charge shot. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Mega Man's 4 and Beyond increased boss iframes by a significant margin in order to make the charge shot the better weapon for defeating bosses over the pea shooter. But since Mega Man 9 is using shorter iframes, more akin to Mega Man 2, it means that Mega Man's normal pea shooter is usually more effective against bosses than Proto Man's charge shot. On top of that, many normal enemies who have a lot of health are easier to kill by rapid firing them, rather than using the charge shot, as enemies don't have iframes. This is even true in the other Mega Man games where Mega Man does have a charge shot. So now that Proto Man only has 2 bullets he can have on screen at once, he's even further nerfed against some of the basic enemies. On top of all of that, Proto Man has no shop he can go to. You can find E-Tanks, like in Plugman stage, but the game is, once again, balanced to have a shop, meaning far less E-Tanks in the stages than the prior Mega Man games, additionally nerfing Proto Man. Beyond tools like half damage and spike protection, that also means no energy balancer. When Proto Man jumps, he'll pull out his shield to block projectiles. This came so not in handy, I don't even know if I have footage of myself blocking a projectile with it. I'm sure it can be helpful, its usage is just limited. Meaning, the Proto Shield is worse in functionality than it is in Mega Man 7, where players can obtain the Proto Shield which works while standing. So what this all creates is an alternate hard mode. It's kind of like how one way to view Mega Man and Bass is that Bass is, for the most part, the normal or easy mode of the game, and Mega Man is the normal or hard mode of the game. So Mega Man is normal mode, and Proto Man is hard mode, but with a more unique twist as to why. From a lore perspective, as Proto Man is the prototype and Mega Man is shown to be more powerful in combat, this does all make a lot of sense. The only real issue is that the game isn't remotely designed around Proto Man, unlike Mega Man and Bass, where you can see a lot of sections were thought through as areas that might be meant for one character or the other. But as this is alternate additional DLC, I think it's a fun addition, and do think this is a much better way to handle a hard mode, and even prefer this over the hero or superhero modes. So there you have Mega Man 9. It's a game that I was very excited for before it came out. After waiting a decade for a new Mega Man game, I was primed and ready, and as someone whose favorite Mega Man games are Mega Man 2 and 3, it seemed like the game that would be made for me. There's a lot about the game that is fantastically designed. As I kept on praising, I think all of the Robot Masters are very well done, and the variety in their attack patterns, in particular, stands out as inspired. The stages are almost all incredibly fair in their challenges, properly introducing new mechanics before rapidly increasing their difficulty. Like the early Mega Man games, all of the stages are short and sweet, which makes them feel punchy and well-paced, with challenges that rarely overstay their welcome. Additionally, something I didn't know my first time playing the game as a Mega Buster player, but have learned through replaying and constantly experimenting with the boss weapons, is this could just be the Mega Man game with the best overall collection of boss weapons and challenges specifically designed not only with the Mega Buster in mind, but with specific boss weapons in mind, making them all feel particularly useful in their own right. It is one of the most difficult classic Mega Man games, and I think that will have a pretty heavy effect on each individual's playing experience and what they think of the game. I will say though, after replaying Mega Man 8 and playing Mega Man in Base for the first time, I do think there were a lot of interesting concepts that I really wish I'd seen explored in Mega Man 9 rather than this retro revival. That doesn't take away from the game that Mega Man 9 is, but I do think it's a shame so many cool concepts and ideas were completely dropped. So here's the thing. I think I've been giving Mega Man 9 a large heaping of praise, and I do like the game, but for some reason, I've never liked it as much as the other classic Mega Man games. I think there's a large portion of that which is honestly subconscious bias from not liking the soundtrack as much as other games, because that really does affect my overall enjoyment of the game more than I'd like to admit. If you watched my Mega Man 4 video, I ragged on Drill Man's stage a bit, mainly because I didn't subjectively like the music and aesthetic of the stage, although I came to admit that the actual stage gameplay design is interesting and well done. There are very minor grievances I have with Mega Man 9 in certain challenges and some stages not being the most interesting to me, but really, those are minor critiques of a game that is well made and well designed. So I've been doing this tier list of the Mega Man games, where I rank my favorite and least favorite Mega Man games amongst themselves. I am a huge Mega Man fan, so even a low letter doesn't mean the game is bad, it just means I happen to like the other Mega Man games more. And I'm kind of running into a personal conundrum with where to place Mega Man 9. I haven't had any real rules to this other than which game would I like to play over the others, and there's a little bit of historical significance in how I placed Mega Man 1. Initially, before writing this, I honestly placed Mega Man 9 as my least favorite of the classic Mega Man games. But I don't think that's fair to Mega Man 9, so I think what I'm going to do is move Mega Man 1 down to an E rank. I like the music in Mega Man 1, and I appreciate everything it did for creating the series, but really, every other game has built off of its foundation in a better and meaningful way, to my opinion. Between Mega Man 5 and Mega Man 9, I think Mega Man 9 is probably the better game, although I far prefer Mega Man 5's soundtrack, and I have so much nostalgia for that game. This is actually the hardest decision I've made in any of these videos, but I think I'm also bumping Mega Man 5 down to a D and placing Mega Man 9 at a C. Mega Man 5 is so nostalgic for me, but I really do think Mega Man 9 is a better designed game. I'm sorry for those of you who absolutely adore Mega Man 9 that it's not higher. It's a well-made game, and I get the love for it. I just happen to prefer replaying the games I placed above it. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is actually my 10th video in the classic Mega Man series, which is insane. So if you like this video and haven't watched them, please consider checking those out. I just checked my page count for all of these scripts, and I am at 533 pages so far, writing about classic Mega Man. Insane. I've also started a couple new series. I recently started a series on the classic Sonic games, and recently finished my video on Sonic CD. And beyond that, I just started a series on the Zelda games. Finally, many of you might know by now, but I've actually been working on my own game with a friend over the past few years. We haven't posted many updates since our last trailer over a year ago, because we're trying to grind away at making the game, but if it does look at all interesting to you, we'd love if you supported us by following our company's YouTube channel, Ophidian Interactive, on YouTube or social media for updates as they come. We will eventually have more trailers and behind-the-scenes content for the making of the game, and I've been building a base of behind-the-scenes content so we can eventually show the fun progression of making something original. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace. Videos.